My name is Keisha. I am 32 years old, and exactly 7 days after I moved into what was supposed to be my dream home, a single phone call unraveled my entire marriage. I was standing in the kitchen of our new property in a quiet, affluent suburb of Atlanta, up to my elbows in packing paper and bubble wrap. My phone vibrated on the marble island. The caller ID showed Mrs. Washington, the sweet, 70-year-old black woman who had sold us the house well below market value simply because she liked my spirit. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered, expecting a question about forwarded mail. Instead, her voice was a hushed, urgent whisper. "Keisha, baby. Listen to me carefully. I forgot to disconnect one of the old security cameras in the basement storage room. I was going through my app to delete the account, and I saw your husband and his mother down there an hour ago." She paused, and the sharp intake of her breath made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Do not tell him I called. Get out of that house right now and come alone to my new condo." The phone almost slipped from my sweating palm. Before I could even process the absolute dread pooling in my stomach, the heavy oak door leading from the garage flew open, slamming against the wall with a violent thud. I quickly shoved my phone into my back pocket just as Terrence marched into the kitchen. My husband of 4 years did not ask who I was talking to. He did not ask how the unpacking was going. He just scowled at the cardboard boxes cluttering his path and forcefully kicked one out of his way. The box skidded across the floor, the sound grating against my already frayed nerves. "What is all this trash doing in the middle of the floor, Keisha?" he snapped, loosening his silk tie. "I have been working all day. I do not want to come home to a disaster zone." I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting the familiar metallic tang of suppressed anger. Terrence always spoke to me like an incompetent employee rather than his wife. "I was working too, Terrence," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Unpacking the kitchen, you insisted we needed to host Thanksgiving next month." Before he could issue another complaint, the sharp click of low heels announced the arrival of the real nightmare. Miss Loretta, my mother-in-law, swept into the room right behind him. She did not bother offering a greeting. Instead, she immediately walked over to the island, running a manicured finger across the freshly wiped granite countertop and inspecting her fingertip for imaginary dust. "Terrence is right," she declared, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She lingered on my natural hair, which I had pulled back into a simple puff for moving day. Her mouth twisted into that familiar, thinly veiled grimace of disapproval she reserved exclusively for my appearance. "This kitchen desperately needs a woman's touch. Keisha is always too busy typing up those little non-profit grants to keep a proper home for my son." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. Those little non-profit grants were the exact reason we were standing in $1 million home, but Terrence and Miss Loretta did not know that. They thought my grant writing was a cute little hobby that brought in a modest salary. They had no idea about the corporate consulting firm I had built from the ground up in secret. Terrence sighed, leaning against the refrigerator as if dealing with me was a physical burden. "Mom is right. Chloe would never let a kitchen look this chaotic, and she is pregnant. You have zero excuses." There it was. The inevitable comparison to his younger sister Chloe, the golden child of the family. Chloe was 28, entitled, incredibly spoiled, and married to Connor, a white man who coasted purely on the financial handouts my mother-in-law provided. Miss Loretta worshipped Chloe, treating her like royalty while viewing my dark skin and independent drive as a personal insult to their family's perceived high status. "You know," Miss Loretta continued, adjusting her designer scarf, "if you spent half as much time making this house a home as you do playing businesswoman, Terrence would not be so stressed. A man needs peace, Keisha, not whatever this is." She gestured disdainfully at the boxes of my grandmother's china I had been carefully unwrapping. The old Keisha would have argued. The old Keisha would have pointed out that I had paid for every single dishpot and pan in this room. But Mrs. Washington's urgent warning was screaming in my mind. What were they doing in the basement storage room? We had not moved a single box down there yet. The basement was supposed to be completely empty. I forced my jaw to unclamp and plastered on the most submissive, accommodating smile I could muster. "You are absolutely right, Miss Loretta," I said smoothly. I have just been so overwhelmed with getting the basics unpacked. In fact, I am so disorganized I completely forgot to buy the special granite cleaner for these counters. I cannot have them getting ruined. Terence rolled his eyes, muttering about my incompetence under his breath. But the flattery worked on his mother. She puffed up her chest, pleased that I had bowed to her domestic superiority. "Well, go get it then," she commanded, taking a seat at the island. "Terence and I will start organizing these cabinets properly while you are gone. Do not take all day." I grabbed my purse and car keys, nodding meekly. "Take your time," I said. "I want everything to be perfect." The moment the garage door closed behind me, the fake smile dropped from my face. I practically sprinted to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. I backed out of the driveway and sped out of our manicured subdivision. My mind was racing a mile a minute. Terence had explicitly told me he was going straight to the office this morning for back-to-back meetings. Miss Loretta had claimed she was spending the entire day at her church finalizing the upcoming choir schedule. Yet according to Mrs. Washington, they had both been sneaking around in my basement an hour ago. The drive to Mrs. Washington's new condo took exactly 22 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every red light was an agonizing delay. I kept replaying my mother-in-law's smug face the way Terence had kicked my belongings. For 4 years I had tolerated their blatant disrespect. I had endured Miss Loretta constantly undermining my role as a wife, making sly comments about my background and acting as if I should be eternally grateful that her successful son had chosen to marry me. I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace, believing that love required compromise. But sneaking around in my basement was not a microaggression. It was a violation. I thought about the house itself. It was a sprawling, beautiful property that I had fallen in love with the moment I saw it. Mrs. Washington and I had connected instantly during the open house. She had seen right through Terence's charming facade and pulled me aside to negotiate the final price directly with me. She told me she wanted a strong black woman to own the home she and her late husband had built together. She had handed me the keys with a warm hug just a week ago. Why would she be calling me now with such a frantic tone? What could possibly be hidden in a completely empty basement? I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles aching. Terence had been acting strange ever since the closing papers were signed. He had been overly eager to handle the deed registration himself, insisting his firm's legal team could expedite the process. He had been highly protective of the basement, claiming he wanted to measure it for a home theater and asking me not to start unpacking my seasonal items down there until he was finished. I had brushed it off as typical male territorial behavior. Now that behavior felt incredibly sinister. I pulled into the parking lot of Mrs. Washington's new senior living community, my tires screeching slightly against the pavement. I parked haphazardly, not caring if I was perfectly between the lines. I grabbed my purse and practically ran to the lobby doors. My chest was tight, my breathing shallow. I buzzed her unit number, and she answered immediately, buzzing me in without a single word. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt agonizingly slow. The polished steel doors reflected my anxious expression. I looked like a woman on the edge of a cliff waiting for the wind to push her over. When the doors finally slid open, Mrs. Washington was already standing in the hallway outside her unit. She wore a heavy knit cardigan despite the warm Atlanta weather, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her eyes, usually so bright and welcoming, were wide with absolute concern. She ushered me inside, quickly locking the deadbolt behind us. She did not offer me tea or water. She did not ask about the move. She just walked straight over to her dining table, where an iPad sat propped up on a stand. "Sit down, Keisha," she said softly, pulling out a chair for me. "You need to see this for yourself." I sank into the chair, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "What did they do?" I asked, my voice barely more than a ragged whisper. "What is down there?" Mrs. Washington shook her head slowly, her expression grim. "It is not what they put down there, baby. It is what they are planning to do to you." Mrs. Washington slid the sleek silver iPad across the polished mahogany table. She tapped the screen with a manicured finger, and the crisp night vision footage filled the display. I leaned in with my breath catching in my throat. The camera angle was positioned perfectly in the upper corner of my basement storage room. That was the exact same room I had just spent $5,000 of my own money to have professionally waterproofed and finished with beautiful dark oak floors. On the screen, the heavy basement door creaked open. Terrence walked in first, holding a heavy steel crowbar. Right behind him was Miss Loretta clutching a flashlight and looking around like a burglar casing a joint. I watched in absolute horror as the man I married drove the sharp edge of the crowbar straight into the pristine oak planks. The loud, agonizing crunch of splintering wood echoed from the iPad speakers. He was destroying my home. Miss Loretta pointed the flashlight directly at the gap he was creating, and her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly greed. "Keep prying," she ordered, with her voice captured perfectly by the hidden microphone. "It has to be right under the central joist. Once you force her name off the deed, we can finally move Chloe and Connor in. They desperately need the space for the new baby." I felt a physical blow to my chest. They were planning to steal my house and move my entitled sister-in-law into my space. But Miss Loretta was not finished. "Look at her anyway," my mother-in-law scoffed while crossing her arms over her chest. "She is far too dark to be representing our family at country club events. She is too stubborn to listen to reason, and let us be honest, Terrence, she is never going to give you children anyway. Why you married a woman who spends her whole life typing on a laptop instead of giving me grandbabies is beyond me." The air in Mrs. Washington's condo grew thin. My hands clenched into tight fists on my lap. Miss Loretta had always made sly, passive-aggressive comments about my rich, dark complexion, and she frequently offered me skin-lightening creams wrapped as birthday gifts under the guise of skincare. She had always weaponized my fertility struggles, knowing full well that Terrence and I had been trying to conceive for 2 years. Hearing her say those words out loud and hearing the raw, unfiltered malice in her voice completely shattered every illusion I had left about my marriage. But Terrence's reaction was what truly broke me. My husband did not defend me. He did not tell his mother to stop disrespecting his wife. Instead, he let out a loud and genuine laugh. "Do not worry, Ma," Terrence said on the recording while plunging his hands into the hole he had just ripped in my floorboards. "The lawyer said the fake LLC transfer will clear right before Thanksgiving. We just have to keep her thinking she is in control of her little grant writing business until the papers are processed. Once I merge her holdings into my firm, she will be out on the street with absolutely nothing." He grunted with effort and pulled a heavy metal lockbox out of the dirt beneath the foundation. He held it up triumphantly and grinned at his mother. "We found it," he cheered. "The old man's hidden safe." Mrs. Washington reached over and tapped the screen, pausing the video right on my husband's greedy, smiling face. She leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "My late husband used to keep his old property blueprints and some emergency cash in that box," she explained, with a voice that was steady and calm. Terrence must have heard the neighborhood rumors about the crazy old man burying treasure in the foundation. "But I am not a fool, Keisha. I dug up that box and emptied it months before I ever put the house on the market. They just ruined your brand new floors for an empty tin can." A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. This was never a marriage. This was a calculated financial hit job. Terrence thought my consulting firm was just a minor side hustle and a little LLC that brought in pocket change. He thought he could pull a fast one with a fraudulent property transfer to kick me out and hand my $1 million home over to Chloe and her jobless white husband Connor. He thought I was just a naive, desperate woman who would roll over and disappear. He had no idea who he was actually dealing with. I pulled my phone from my pocket and quickly linked it to Mrs. Washington's iPad. I transferred the video file directly into my heavily encrypted cloud server, which was the exact same server I used to store highly confidential financial data for my multi-million-dollar nonprofit clients. Once the transfer was complete, I locked the folder behind dual authentication firewalls. "Mrs. Washington," I said, with my voice eerily calm, "I cannot thank you enough for showing me this. You just saved my life." She reached across the table and placed her warm, weathered hand over mine. "You are a strong, brilliant black woman, Keisha. I sold you that house because I saw the fire in your eyes. Do not let those leeches take a single brick of what belongs to you. You go back there and you play the game until you hold all the cards. Then you burn their kingdom to the ground." I stood up and adjusted my jacket. I intend to do exactly that. The drive back to the affluent suburb felt entirely different than the panicked drive out. The fear and confusion were gone, and they were completely replaced by a hyper-focused, icy determination. My mind went into overdrive calculating every single move Terrence had made since we signed the closing papers. He had insisted on managing the deed registration by claiming his holding company had a fast-track legal team. He had aggressively pushed me to merge my bank accounts with his, using the excuse of building marital trust. I had refused the joint accounts and opted to pay the entire $200,000 down payment from my own separate funds. Terrence had been furious but masked it as concern for my financial independence. He was trying to bleed me dry. He wanted to strip my name from the property and absorb my LLC, to steal whatever small funds he thought I had, and hand my house to his precious sister. As I turned onto my street, the large oak trees and perfectly manicured lawns passed by in a blur. I took a deep breath and composed my features. I needed to walk into that house and act like the clueless, obedient wife they believed me to be. I needed to smile at the woman who mocked my skin color and the man who planned to throw me on the street. I rounded the corner to my property and slammed on the brakes. My car jerked to a halt at the edge of the driveway. Parked right on the lush green grass of my front lawn was a massive, battered U-Haul trailer. The tires had already carved deep, muddy trenches into the sod I had just paid a landscaping company to lay down 3 days ago. Standing at the back of the trailer and wrestling with a massive cardboard box was Connor. Chloe's husband was 31 years old and perpetually unemployed, and he carried himself with the unearned confidence of a man who had never faced a single consequence in his entire life. He wore stained cargo shorts and a faded college fraternity shirt while sweating profusely in the afternoon sun. He was unloading moving boxes onto my property. I sat in my idling car for 3 full seconds and let the sheer audacity of the scene burn itself into my memory. Terrence and Miss Loretta had not even waited for their fake legal transfer to clear. They were moving the golden child in today. I put the car in park and grabbed my purse before stepping out into the humid Atlanta air. The game had officially begun, and I was going to play it better than any of them could ever comprehend. I slam my car door shut and march up my own concrete driveway. The midday sun is beating down on the back of my neck, but the heat is nothing compared to the absolute fire burning in my chest. Parked illegally across my freshly landscaped lawn is a rusted U-Haul trailer. Connor is standing on the lowered ramp, his pale sunburned shoulders glistening with sweat as he wrestles a heavy cardboard box out of the back. He does not even have the decency to look embarrassed when he sees me approaching. Instead, he drops the box right onto the manicured grass, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. He kicks the box down the ramp. It lands exactly at my feet, kicking up a cloud of dry dirt onto my leather shoes. "Careful with that." Keisha Connor smirks, crossing his arms over his chest. Chloe wants the master suite painted eggshell before we officially move in tomorrow. She says the current beige is entirely too depressing for the baby's nursery. I look down at the box. The words Chloe's maternity are scrawled across the top in thick black marker. He actually wants me, the woman who purchased this $1 million home in cash, to carry his pregnant wife's clothing inside and then paint my own master bedroom for them. The absolute unmitigated gall is almost suffocating. He stands there waiting for me to act like the hired help. I do not say a single word to him. I simply lift my foot and step squarely over the box, leaving it exactly where it fell in the dirt. I do not look back as I hear Connor scoff and mutter something under his breath about my attitude. I have much bigger problems waiting inside my house. I push open the heavy mahogany front door and step into the grand foyer. The air conditioning hits my face, but it does nothing to cool my temper. The house is a chaotic mess of half-opened boxes, completely disregarding the careful organizational system I had set up just yesterday. Miss Loretta is sitting on my expensive velvet living room sofa, her shoes resting right on the delicate upholstery. She is sipping a glass of iced tea and scrolling through her phone, looking entirely too comfortable in a house she is actively trying to steal. Before I can even take off my shoes, Terrence intercepts me in the hallway. He steps directly into my path, physically blocking me from moving past him. He does not ask if I found the granite cleaner. He does not ask how my drive was. He shoves a thick stack of stapled papers directly against my chest, forcing me to grab them before they fall to the floor. "Sign these," Terrence demands, tapping the top page with a heavy gold pen. I look down at the dense legal jargon covering the first page. "What is this, Terrence?" I ask, keeping my voice perfectly level. "It is just some routine tax paperwork," he says, waving his hand dismissively. "My accountant said we need to merge your little grant-writing hobby under the umbrella of my investment firm. Mom said it is much better for our marital assets moving forward. It simplifies our tax bracket now that we own this massive property. Just sign on the dotted line at the bottom and initial the next 3 pages. I need to scan it to the lawyers before 3 o'clock." I stare at the papers in my hand. He is lying right to my face, using his mother as an excuse to validate his financial control. He has been draining my resources since the day we met. I remember standing in the bridal boutique 4 years ago, my heart sinking as my credit card was declined for my wedding dress. Terrence had promised to transfer the funds the day before, claiming his massive investment portfolio was temporarily tied up in a high-yield offshore account. I ended up paying for the entire $70,000 wedding myself, pulling from my secret corporate consulting profits while letting him play the role of the wealthy provider for his family. He has never had any real money. He just had the audacity to spend mine. I scanned the fine print on the document he just shoved into my hands. It is not tax paperwork. It is not a merger agreement for our businesses. The bold lettering buried beneath a paragraph of distracting legal fluff reads "Full financial power of attorney." If I sign this paper, I am legally handing Terrence absolute control over every single bank account, investment portfolio, and real estate deed attached to my name. It gives him the legal right to drain my savings, sell my assets, and execute the exact fraudulent LLC transfer he and his mother were just laughing about in my basement. He wants me to hand him the knife he plans to stab me in the back with. "Keisha." "I do not have all day," Terrence snaps, snapping his fingers in front of my face. "Stop reading it like you are some corporate lawyer. You do not even understand half of those words anyway. Just sign it so I can get back to work. I have actual clients waiting on me." I look up from the document and meet his gaze. His eyes are hard, impatient, and completely devoid of any love or respect. This is the man who promised to protect me. This is the man who stood at an altar and vowed to build a life with me. And right behind him, sitting on my sofa, is the woman who raised him to view me as nothing more than a disposable stepping stone. I feel a cold, calculating smile spread across my face. I do not scream. I do not throw the papers in his face. I do not tell him that I just watched high-definition night vision footage of him ripping up my basement floorboards. I need him to believe he has won. I need him to feel completely untouchable, so that when I finally pull the rug out from under him, the fall shatters him entirely. "You are right, Terrence," I say smoothly, my voice dripping with fake submission. "I really do not understand all this legal jargon. If your accountant says it is best for our taxes, then I trust you." I take the heavy gold pen from his outstretched hand. I flip to the signature page. I do not write Keisha Williams. I do not write my maiden name. I press the pen firmly into the paper and sign a completely illegible looping scribble that looks vaguely like a child trying to test a new marker. I flip to the next page and initial with a messy, unrecognizable scrawl. I do this for every single page he requested. I make absolutely sure that the signature cannot be legally tied to me in any court of law. I cap the pen and hand the stack of papers back to him with a sweet, obedient smile. "Done," I say cheerfully. Terrence snatches the papers from my hand without even glancing at the signature line. He is too arrogant, too blinded by his own perceived brilliance to check my work. "Perfect," he says, a triumphant smirk flashing across his face as he looks over his shoulder at Miss Loretta. "See, Mom, I told you she would handle it. I am going to scan these right now. Do not forget you need to clean those baseboards before you start cooking dinner." He turns on his heel and marches down the hallway toward his home office, clutching the worthless stack of paper like it is a winning lottery ticket. Miss Loretta watches him go, her chest puffing with pride before she turns her condescending glare back to me. "You heard my son, Keisha," she says, taking another slow sip of her iced tea. "The baseboards in the guest room are filthy. Chloe cannot be around dust in her condition. Get the bleach." I smile at her, a sharp, dangerous smile that she is entirely too oblivious to understand. "Right away, Miss Loretta," I say, turning away from her. As I walk toward the kitchen, my phone immediately buzzes violently in my back pocket. It is a long, sustained vibration, indicating a high-priority alert. I slip into the pantry and pull the phone out the screen, illuminating the dark, narrow space. The notification banner flashes across the glass. It is a high-security alert from the private offshore banking portal that holds my primary corporate consulting funds. The message is short, terrifying, and completely validating. Alert. Primary bank login password changed. Unauthorized access detected. Terrence did not wait for the ink to dry on that fake power of attorney. He had already attempted to hack into what he thought was my modest savings account. But he has no idea that the account he just breached is a decoy, a carefully constructed financial trap I set up months ago to monitor his shady behavior. He thinks he just locked me out of my own life. He thinks he has seized control of my assets. He thinks he is the predator and I am the prey. I slide the phone back into my pocket, the cold light fading into the darkness of the pantry. I stand there for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of Miss Loretta barking orders at Connor in the front yard. They are moving into a house they think they have successfully stolen. They are preparing to live a life funded by my hard work. But they have just triggered a security protocol that gives me absolute, undeniable proof of federal wire fraud. I push the pantry door open and step back into the bright kitchen. I grab a bucket, a sponge, and a bottle of bleach. I am going to clean those baseboards exactly as requested. I am going to play the perfect subservient wife for just a little while longer. Because when you are setting a trap for a pack of wolves, you have to make sure they are completely comfortable before you slam the cage shut. I scrubbed every inch of those guest room baseboards exactly as Miss Loretta demanded. I wiped away the muddy footprints Connor tracked across my freshly polished floors without a single complaint. I played the role of the obedient broken wife so perfectly that by the time evening fell, Terrence was looking at me with an expression of absolute smug victory. He genuinely believed his fake power of attorney had broken my spirit. He believed the bank alert he triggered earlier that afternoon had secured his financial dominance over me. He had no idea he had just walked blindly into a highly monitored decoy account that held a fraction of my actual wealth. Dinner was a master class in disrespect. Miss Loretta had invited herself, Chloe, and Connor to stay for a formal family dinner to celebrate their official move-in. She sat at the opposite end of my massive mahogany dining table, acting as if she were the matriarch of an estate she had personally funded. I served the roast chicken and seasoned vegetables I had spent the last 2 hours preparing. Terrence sat at the head of the table, swirling a glass of my imported red wine like he was a king surveying his conquered kingdom. Chloe did not even bother sitting down to eat properly. She was pacing back and forth across my formal dining room with a bright yellow measuring tape in her hands. She stretched the metal tape across the custom bay windows I had carefully selected. "These drapes are entirely too dark," Keisha Chloe announced over her shoulder. "The fabric is heavy and depressing. I'm going to need something light and airy to match the aesthetic I want for the nursery down the hall." I ordered some custom silk panels from that luxury linen boutique downtown. They should be here by Tuesday. I kept my expression perfectly blank as I set a platter of roasted potatoes on the table. My phone had buzzed 3 hours ago with a fraud alert for a $2,000 charge at that exact boutique. Terrence had clearly handed his sister my credit card the moment he thought he had unrestricted access to my finances. Let them spend it, I thought to myself. Every fraudulent swipe is just another nail in their legal coffin. Chloe strutted back toward the dining table, rubbing her slightly rounded belly. "It is just so generous of Terrence to buy this massive house for our family," she beamed, flashing a brilliant fake smile at her brother. "Connor and I were so stressed about finding a place with enough room for the new baby. We are just so blessed that you stepped up and provided for us, Terrence." Terrence puffed out his chest and took a long, arrogant sip of his wine. "That is what real men do, Chloe. They make sure their blood relatives are taken care of no matter what it costs. The sheer delusion radiating from his words was almost suffocating. He sat there, soaking up his sister's praise completely, ignoring the hard documented fact that the entire $200,000 down payment for this property came directly from my separate corporate bank account. Terrence did not contribute a single dime to the closing costs. His own bank accounts were constantly overdrawn because of his reckless spending and failed business ventures. Yet he sat in the house I bought acting like a billionaire philanthropist. As Chloe moved to take her seat, she swung her hip outward. The movement was entirely deliberate. Her body caught the edge of the table right where my favorite custom-blown glass vase sat. It was a stunning, heavy piece I had imported from a gallery in Italy. The vase teetered on the edge for a split second before plummeting to the hardwood floor. It shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. The sharp crack echoed through the dining room, bringing the conversation to a dead halt. Chloe looked down at the shattered glass and gave a theatrical little gasp. "Oops," she said, her tone completely devoid of any actual remorse. "Well, we really needed to get rid of all these fragile things anyway. We have to start baby-proofing the house, Keisha. You cannot just leave dangerous objects sitting around where a child could get hurt." Connor chuckled around a mouthful of chicken, pointing his fork at the mess. "Better get a broom, Keisha. You do not want anyone stepping on that." They all laughed. A unified, cruel chorus of mockery echoing in my own home. My mother-in-law wiped a tear of amusement from her eye, and Terrence just shook his head as if my choice of home decor was an embarrassing flaw he had to tolerate. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream at Chloe for destroying a piece of art that cost more than her husband's entire yearly income. I simply turned around, walked into the kitchen, and retrieved the broom and dustpan. I returned to the dining room and quietly dropped to my knees, sweeping up the sharp shards of glass while they continued to eat and ignore me. I was gathering every piece of my shattered patience and funneling it directly into my plan for their absolute destruction. When I finally stood up and disposed of the glass, Terrence tapped his silver fork against his wine crystal. The sharp ringing sound commanded the room's attention. He stood up at the head of the table, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive tailored shirt. "Now that the family is all together, I want to make a quick toast," Terrence announced, looking around the room. He deliberately avoided making eye contact with me. "To fresh starts and family legacy. Connor and Chloe, we are thrilled to have you here. And to make sure everyone is comfortable, we are going to make a few small adjustments to the floor plan." He finally turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were cold and commanding, completely stripped of any affection. "Keisha, I need you to pack up your home office tonight." I froze, gripping the back of an empty dining chair. My home office was the largest spare bedroom on the main floor. It held my dual-monitor setup, my secure filing cabinets, and the entire infrastructure of my consulting firm. "Pack it up," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, pack it up," Terrence stated flatly. "Connor needs a dedicated gaming room. He is going to be stressed with the new baby arriving, and he needs a quiet space to unwind and focus on his job hunt. Your little grant writing hobby does not require an entire room. You can just bring your laptop downstairs and write your grants from the kitchen island. It makes much more sense for the family." Miss Loretta nodded in fervent agreement, tapping the table with her manicured nails. "It is the only logical solution, Terrence. A man needs his space. Keisha should be spending her time in the kitchen anyway, learning how to properly care for a household instead of hiding away in an office all day." I looked at Connor. He was leaning back in his chair, picking his teeth with a toothpick, looking incredibly pleased with himself. He was a grown man, demanding my workspace so he could play video games while I funded his existence. I looked at Chloe, who was smirking behind her water glass. And finally, I looked at Terrence, the man who had promised to support my dreams, now actively trying to erase my presence in my own home. They wanted me relegated to a bar stool in the kitchen. They wanted me stripped of my space, my finances, and my dignity. They were pushing me into a corner, assuming I would just shrink and disappear. I took a deep, slow breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. I let my shoulders slump forward perfectly, mimicking the posture of a defeated, broken woman. I looked Terrence dead in the eye and nodded slowly. "Sure, Terrence," I said, my voice soft and compliant. "I will grab some boxes and clear out the office right after I finish washing the dishes. Whatever is best for the family." Terrence smiled a genuine self-satisfied grin. "Good girl," he praised as if he were speaking to a well-trained dog. The dinner concluded with Miss Loretta praising Chloe's appetite and Terrence discussing his grand plans for the backyard landscaping. I moved silently around the table, collecting the dirty plates and carrying them into the kitchen. I scraped the leftover food into the garbage disposal and stacked the china in the sink, playing the invisible servant to perfection. As I walked back into the dining room to clear the final empty wine glasses, Terrence was engaged in a loud conversation with Connor about a football game. Terrence's expensive tailored suit jacket was draped carelessly over the back of his dining chair. I stepped up directly behind his chair, reaching for the wine glasses in front of him. My movements were smooth, practiced, and entirely unthreatening. As my left hand cleared the crystal from the table, my right hand brushed against the soft fabric of his jacket. I felt the solid rectangular weight of his smartphone resting in the inner breast pocket. With a swift, silent motion, I slipped my fingers into the pocket. I slid the phone out and immediately dropped it deep into the front pocket of my cleaning apron. The entire extraction took less than 2 seconds. Terrence did not miss a single beat of his conversation. He did not feel a thing. I carried the last of the glasses into the kitchen and let the swinging door close behind me, shutting out the sound of their arrogant laughter. I pulled his phone from my apron and held it in my palm. Terrence thought he had secured the keys to my financial kingdom today. He thought he had outsmarted me. But he was about to learn that, when you invite a predator into your home, you should never hand them the map to all your secrets. I pressed my back against the cool, solid wood of the downstairs bathroom door and slid the heavy brass lock into place. My breathing is loud in the small enclosed space. The muffled sounds of Terrence and Connor arguing over sports statistics echo from the dining room down the hall, blending with the shrill sound of Chloe complaining about the humidity. I reach into the deep pocket of my cleaning apron and pull out Terrence's smartphone. The screen illuminates my face in the dim light, casting long shadows across the marble tile. I do not hesitate for a single second. I swipe up to unlock the device and input the passcode. I figured it out months ago just by watching the movement of his thumbs. It is his own birth month followed by Chloe's birth year. He is entirely predictable, completely obsessed with his own reflection, and absolutely devoted to his golden child sister. The phone unlocks instantly, opening to his home screen. I do not bother looking at his text messages or his call log. I do not care if he has a mistress or a secret second life. I am looking for the financial kill shot. I open his primary email application and navigate straight to the folders he has marked as encrypted. He uses a basic secondary passcode for his work folders, which is the exact same 4-digit code he uses for our home security system. He really thinks he is a mastermind, but he is nothing more than a careless, arrogant fool. I tap into the folder labeled Investments, and my stomach drops to the floor. The sheer volume of frantic, threatening emails is staggering. There are hundreds of unread messages, all flagged with high-priority, red exclamation points. I open the first thread. It is from a man demanding an immediate return on a $100,000 retirement investment. I open the next one. It is a severe legal threat from a private wealth management group, citing a massive breach of fiduciary duty and threatening immediate federal action. I scroll rapidly with my eyes darting across the digital evidence of my husband's complete and utter ruin. Terrence does not run a legitimate investment firm. He runs a massive crumbling Ponzi scheme. The documents spell it out in black and white. He has been taking money from new investors to pay off the massive guaranteed dividends he promised to the old ones. He has been aggressively skimming off the top to fund his bespoke designer suits, his luxury car leases, and the ridiculous monthly allowances he hands out to his mother and sister to maintain the illusion of extreme wealth. But the new money has stopped coming in. The well is bone dry and his entire house of cards is collapsing. I open a spreadsheet attachment labeled Master Liabilities, and I have to physically brace myself against the bathroom vanity. Terrence is in the hole for $500,000. $500,000 is owed to incredibly shady hard money lenders who do not send polite collection letters or file standard lawsuits. The emails from these particular creditors are brief, violent, and explicitly clear about what will happen to his legs if they do not receive their money by the end of November. My hands are shaking as I open the most recent email thread at the very top of the folder. It is from a broker specializing in high-risk equity loans. The subject line reads, "Final approval pending." I read the message, and the true depth of Terrence's depravity finally crystallizes in my mind. He is not just trying to steal my house to give his sister a nice place to live. Chloe and Connor are just the convenient cover story to justify getting my name off the property. The second that forged power of attorney clears, and my $1 million home is transferred into his shell company, he is using the property as collateral to take out a $500,000 cash-out refinance loan. He plans to drain all the equity I built with my own cash down payment and use it to pay off his dangerous creditors. When the dust settles and the massive new mortgage defaults, the bank will foreclose on the house. Chloe and Connor will be evicted without a second thought. I will be left homeless and financially destroyed with my credit completely ruined. And Terrence will walk away free and clear, playing the victim of a bad real estate market while leaving me to burn in the wreckage of his crimes. A sudden violent pounding on the bathroom door makes me jump. "Keisha, what are you doing in there? Stop hiding and come serve the dessert." Miss Loretta's shrill, demanding voice pierces through the heavy wood. She pounds her fist against the door again, rattling the brass hinges. "We have been sitting here waiting for 10 minutes. Chloe needs her blood sugar stabilized right now. Stop being lazy and get into the kitchen." I stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My dark eyes are burning with a fierce, dangerous energy. I remember another time Miss Loretta demanded I serve her guests like a hired maid. It was 3 years ago at our annual family summer cookout. I had spent 12 hours marinating and slow-cooking ribs for 40 people standing over a hot grill in the blazing sun. When it was time to eat, Miss Loretta had marched up to me with a plastic tray and shoved it into my hands. She had intentionally invited Vanessa, who was Terrence's gorgeous light-skinned ex-girlfriend, without telling me. "Make sure Vanessa gets a good piece, Keisha," Miss Loretta had said loud enough for the entire patio to hear. "She has such refined tastes, and we want to make sure she feels like family today." She had smiled that cruel, sugary smile, expecting me to break down or cause a public scene. She had wanted to reduce me to the help in my own backyard, just to put me in my place. I had served Vanessa the ribs with a blank face, burying the hot humiliation deep inside my chest to keep the peace for my husband. They have always thought I was nothing but a domestic servant. They have always believed I lacked the intelligence and the pedigree to sit at their table as an equal. But the servant just found the master key to their absolute destruction. I quickly forward the most damning emails and the loan approval documents directly to my secure hidden server. I delete the forwarded messages from his sent folder and clear the cache to cover my tracks completely. I lock his phone and wipe the glass screen clean of my fingerprints on my apron. "I am coming." "Miss Loretta," I call out, pitching my voice to sound flustered and properly apologetic. "I was just fixing my hair. I want to look nice for family dinner." I hear her scoff loudly on the other side of the door. "Do not bother. You cannot fix what God messed up. Just get the pie on the table." Her footsteps retreat down the hallway. I unlock the door and step out into the corridor. The air conditioning is cool against my skin, and I feel perfectly, terrifyingly calm. I walk past the dining room where Terrence is currently explaining to Connor how to leverage asset depreciation to build generational wealth. The absolute irony is delicious. I brush past Terrence's chair, and with a fluid, practiced motion, I slip his smartphone right back into his tailored jacket pocket. He is too busy boasting about his fake portfolio to notice a thing. I walk into the kitchen and pull the expensive pecan pie from the refrigerator. I carefully slice it into perfect, even triangles and place them onto my imported china dessert plates. I add a dollop of fresh cream to each one. I arrange the plates meticulously on a silver serving tray. I am going to serve them their dessert exactly as they demanded. I push through the swinging door and step back into the dining room. The conversation halts as I approach the table. Connor immediately reaches out and grabs a plate before I even set the tray down. About time, Keisha Connor complains, digging his fork directly into the center of the pie. The baby is practically starving in there. Chloe rolls her eyes, inspecting her slice with a look of pure disgust. I really hope you did not use that cheap store-bought crust this time, Keisha. The preservatives give me terrible heartburn, and I specifically asked for organic ingredients. Miss Loretta just taps her manicured fingernail against the table, waiting for me to place her plate perfectly in front of her without a single word of thanks. Terrence does not even look at me. He takes a long sip of his wine, staring at his reflection in the dark window pane like a man who has already conquered the world. I set the silver tray down on the sideboard and fold my hands neatly in front of my apron. I paste on a bright conversational smile. I look directly at my husband, waiting for him to notice me standing at the head of the table. "Terrence," I say casually, keeping my tone light and breezy. "I got the strangest phone call today, while I was out grabbing the granite cleaner. It was from the major fraud department at the primary bank." Terrence stops swirling his wine. His hand freezes in midair. He slowly turns his head to look at me. His eyes narrow slightly, but he keeps his arrogant posture, leaning back in his expensive dining chair. "Oh," he says, his voice tight and overly controlled. "And what did they want?" "Probably just a routine check. You really need to be more careful with your credit cards, Keisha." I tilt my head to the side, feigning complete innocence. "Well, that is the thing, Terrence. They were not calling about my credit cards. They were calling to verify a hard inquiry for a $500,000 equity cash out loan. The representative said the application listed this exact property as the collateral. They wanted to make sure I had authorized the signature since my name is still technically on the deed." The reaction is instantaneous and glorious. The color completely drains from Terrence's face, leaving his dark skin a sickly grayish hue. The expensive crystal wine glass slips right through his trembling fingers and clatters heavily against the mahogany table. Dark red liquid spills across his pristine white shirt and ruins his expensive silk tie. He does not even try to wipe it up. He just stares at me with his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The arrogant investment banker is suddenly looking at the absolute destruction of his secret empire. At the exact same moment, Connor inhales a massive greedy bite of the pie crust. As the words $500,000 hit the air, he gasps in shock, pulling a sharp, hard piece of pecan straight into his windpipe. Connor begins to choke violently. His face turns bright red as he drops his fork and clutches his throat, hacking and coughing all over the pristine table setting. Chloe drops her cloth napkin, screaming and patting Connor's back in a sheer panic. Miss Loretta jumps up from her chair, knocking it backward onto the floor. Her eyes dart frantically between her choking son-in-law and her completely catatonic son. "Terrence," I say, pitching my voice perfectly over Connor's desperate coughing. I smile warmly, stepping closer to the table. "Did you know anything about that loan application, honey?" Terrence's face remains a mask of sheer, unadulterated panic. The expensive imported red wine drips from the edge of the mahogany dining table, splashing onto the pristine oak floors he plans to destroy. He stammers out a disjointed, high-pitched excuse about bank errors and corporate identity theft. His voice cracks halfway through the sentence. He does not even wait to see if Connor survives his violent choking fit. Terrence pushes his dining chair back so aggressively it tips over and crashes onto the floor. He sprints down the hallway toward his home office, shouting that he needs to make an urgent call to his fraud department. I watch him retreat while Miss Loretta frantically pounds her fists on Connor's back. The sharp piece of pecan finally dislodges, flying across the dining room. Connor gasps for air, his face turning a deep mottled purple, while Chloe hysterically demands a glass of ice water. I stand at the head of the table, holding my silver serving tray, completely unbothered by the absolute chaos unfolding in front of me. I smile warmly at my mother-in-law and tell her I will leave the rest of the pie on the kitchen counter for whenever they recover. The next morning begins before the sun even crests the horizon. I hear the heavy thud of the front door slamming shut, followed immediately by the aggressive roar of Terrence's car engine. I walk to the master bedroom window and pull back the silk curtains just in time to watch his leased luxury sedan speed down the street. He had barely slept a wink, tossing and turning violently all night, before throwing on a wrinkled suit and muttering something about a massive business emergency. He is utterly terrified. He is currently rushing to his fake downtown office to figure out why his fraudulent loan application flagged the banking fraud department and why his unauthorized access to my decoy account failed to grant him the keys to my kingdom. Once the house is completely silent, I walk into my massive walk-in closet. It is time to drop the obedient, clueless wife routine. I push past the sensible cardigans and modest dresses I wear to play the part of a struggling local grant writer. I reach the very back of the closet and pull out a sleek, tailored designer suit that costs more than my mother-in-law makes in an entire year. I slip on a pair of imported leather heels and grab my authentic luxury handbag. I walk out to the garage and bypass the modest hybrid sedan. I drive around the affluent suburbs. I pull the canvas cover off my private weekend car, a pristine, aggressive sports coupe I purchased entirely in cash. As I merge onto the highway, heading toward the city financial district, I let my mind shift entirely into my actual reality. My family has spent years mocking my grant writing business. Miss Loretta constantly belittles my side hustle, and Terrence genuinely believes I sit at a kitchen island begging local charities for $40,000 a year. They have absolutely no idea who I actually am. My firm does not write grants for community gardens or local bake sales. I secure massive federal funding and elite venture capital for high-level tech startups. I navigate dense government defense contracts and secure specialized grants in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And for every single contract I successfully secure, my consulting firm takes a flat 10% cut. I am independently a multi-millionaire. I have built a massive, untouchable financial empire completely under their noses while they treated me like a naive charity case. I intentionally hid my wealth to protect myself from opportunistic men exactly like Terrence, but I never expected his greed to run this incredibly deep. I pull into the secure underground parking garage of a towering glass skyscraper in the heart of downtown Atlanta. I take the private executive elevator directly to the top floor, stepping into the sleek, minimalist lobby of my legal firm. I do not stop at the reception desk to wait. I walk straight down the polished marble corridor and push open the heavy glass doors to the corner office of my lead corporate attorney, Diane Vance. Diane is a ruthless, brilliant legal shark I met 5 years ago while securing funding for a major nonprofit expansion. She has a terrifying reputation for completely dismantling her opponents in the courtroom, leaving them with absolutely nothing but the clothes on their backs. Diane looks up from her polished mahogany desk as I walk in. She sees the sharp, cold look in my eyes and immediately sets her fountain pen down, giving me her full, undivided attention. I do not say a single word as I walk over to her desk. I drop the encrypted flash drive containing the hidden basement iPad footage right next to her keyboard. Then I place a thick, heavily stapled stack of printed documents directly in front of her. These are the emails I forwarded from Terrence's phone last night. I sit down in the leather chair opposite her desk and cross my legs, smoothing the fabric of my tailored suit. I tell Diane everything. I explain the rusted U-Haul currently parked on my freshly landscaped lawn. I detail the fake power of attorney Terrence shoved into my hands, demanding I sign over my entire life under the guise of marital tax benefits. I explain the exact mechanics of his crumbling Ponzi scheme, the desperate investors demanding their retirement funds back, and the violent hard money lenders threatening to break his legs if he does not produce $500,000 by Thanksgiving. Diane listens in absolute calculated silence. She plugs the flash drive into her computer and watches the crisp night vision footage of Terrence destroying my basement floorboards with a steel crowbar, while Miss Loretta actively cheers him on. She reads through every single printed email detailing his massive debts and his explicit plan to drain my home equity. Finally, she picks up the scanned copy of the forged power of attorney that Terrence had immediately submitted to my decoy bank account. She traces her manicured finger over the illegible fake signature I had deliberately scribbled on the dotted line. The silence in the corner office is heavy and electric. The low hum of the city traffic far below is completely drowned out by the gravity of the evidence sitting on her desk. Terrence thought he was a financial mastermind, but he had just handed the smartest attorney in the city a flawless documented trail of his own spectacular ruin. He transmitted a forged legal document across state lines to a federal banking institution in a desperate attempt to secure a fraudulent loan. Diane looks up from the forged document and meets my gaze. She leans back in her expensive leather chair and folds her hands neatly together, resting them on the mahogany desk. She smiles a predator's smile. "Keisha," she says, her voice low and thrilling. "He just committed wire fraud. But let us not call the police yet. Let us let him dig a hole he can never climb out of." I walked out of Diane's high-rise office with a perfectly executed battle plan. The drive back to the affluent suburbs felt entirely different than any commute I had ever made. I was no longer the victim of a calculated financial hit job. I was the architect of its demolition. Terrence thought he had completely outsmarted me with his fake legal documents and his secret equity loan. He had absolutely no idea he had just handed a multi-million-dollar corporate consultant and her ruthless shark of an attorney a flawless documented trail of federal wire fraud. I gripped the leather steering wheel of my sports car and allowed a sharp, cold smile to stretch across my face. I was going to let him dig. I was going to hand him the shovel. But the moment I turned onto my tree-lined street, the peaceful illusion of my neighborhood shattered completely. 3 large white commercial contractor vans were parked haphazardly across my driveway with their tires sinking deep into my freshly watered lawn. The harsh, grating screech of industrial power tools echoed through the quiet afternoon air, vibrating right through the windows of my car. I slammed my car door shut and marched up the front steps. I pushed open the heavy mahogany front door, and a thick, suffocating cloud of sawdust immediately hit my lungs. The grand foyer, which just yesterday featured pristine custom-laid dark oak floorboards, was completely unrecognizable. 4 men in heavy work boots were actively driving steel crowbars and industrial floor scrapers into the expensive imported wood, splintering it into jagged, ruined planks. The beautiful dark finish was being violently ripped from the foundation, leaving behind nothing but exposed concrete and debris. Standing dead center in the living room, completely unbothered by the destruction of my property, was Miss Loretta. She wore a bright pink velour tracksuit and held a steaming mug of my expensive coffee, gesturing wildly with her free hand. "Tear it all out!" she barked over the deafening noise of the power tools. "Every single piece of this ugly dark wood needs to be gone by tomorrow morning. Chloe wants beige carpet in here. It is much softer for the baby to crawl on, and it brightens up the room. That dark wood is far too depressing for a nursery environment." I did not scream. I did not cry. The old Keisha might have fallen to her knees, sobbing over the tens of thousands of dollars being ripped from the foundation of her dream home. The new Keisha just adjusted the strap of her designer handbag and stepped carefully over a pile of splintered oak. I kept my face entirely devoid of emotion. I walked directly past my mother-in-law, entirely ignoring her shocked expression as I approached the man holding a thick metal clipboard. "Excuse me," I said, pitching my voice to cut cleanly through the mechanical noise. "Who exactly is paying for this demolition?" The lead contractor, a burly man with a thick beard and a heavy tool belt, wiped his dusty hands on his jeans. He pulled a printed invoice from his clipboard and handed it to me. "Terrence Washington," he stated firmly, tapping the paper. "He called us first thing this morning, said it was a rush job for his pregnant sister and money was no object. We require a 50% deposit up front for emergency scheduling, which he put on a credit card over the phone. We are just waiting for the authorization to clear our central office." I stared at the bold printed name at the top of the invoice. The sheer unadulterated delusion of my husband was almost awe-inspiring. I knew for an absolute fact, thanks to the encrypted financial tracking software Diane and I had just reviewed, that Terrence's primary checking account was currently overdrawn by exactly $4,200. His business credit cards were maxed out to their absolute limits, suffocating under the weight of his collapsing Ponzi scheme obligations. He was trying to finance a massive emergency home renovation using a card connected to a hollowed-out account. He was fully banking on that fraudulent $500,000 equity loan clearing by the end of the business day. He genuinely believed the bank was about to deposit $500,000 into his account based on my fake signature. He thought the money was already his. He thought he was a king renovating his castle. He was actually a broke, desperate fraudster ordering beige carpet on a bounced check. Miss Loretta stomped over to me, her face twisting into a nasty scowl. Her pink tracksuit rustled aggressively as she crossed her arms over her chest. "Do not interfere with the workers, Keisha," she snapped, demanding my immediate submission. Terrence gave the order. He is the man of this house, and he is making the executive decisions to accommodate his sister. You should be thanking him for taking the initiative to upgrade this depressing decor. Chloe deserves a home that reflects our family's refined tastes. I looked at the woman who had spent the last 4 years mocking my dark complexion and belittling my career. She was standing in the middle of my house directing the destruction of my assets with money her son did not even possess. She was so blinded by her own entitlement that she could not see the massive trap closing around her ankles. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders drop into a relaxed, accommodating posture. I looked at Miss Loretta and smiled. It was a bright, accommodating, and completely subservient smile. "You know what, Loretta," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly agreeable. "You are absolutely right." Loretta blinked rapidly, clearly thrown off balance by my complete lack of resistance. She had been bracing for a fight, ready to assert her dominance, but I offered her absolutely nothing to push against. "The house really does need a makeover," I continued, projecting pure enthusiasm as I looked around the destroyed living room. "In fact, with all these wonderful new changes Terrence is making for Chloe, we should really celebrate properly. Let us host Thanksgiving dinner right here next week. We can invite the entire Washington family, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. They should all be here to see exactly what Terrence has accomplished for his sister." Loretta's eyes narrowed suspiciously. She searched my face for any hint of sarcasm or hidden anger. She was looking for the trap, but my performance was flawless. The temptation to show off her son's supposed wealth to the rest of their extended family was far too strong for her narcissistic ego to resist. She loved playing the wealthy matriarch, and hosting Thanksgiving in a $1 million estate was the ultimate status symbol. "Well," she huffed, puffing out her chest and smoothing down her pink velour jacket, "that is the first sensible thing you have said all week, Keisha. I will call Aunt Denise and Uncle Marcus today. They will be thrilled to see how well Terrence is providing for his family. I expect you to have the guest rooms completely spotless by Monday." "I will get right on that," I said warmly, giving her a polite nod. "I will leave you to supervise the crew, Loretta." As my mother-in-law turned her back to march triumphantly into the kitchen to make her phone calls, I turned my attention back to the lead contractor. I handed the printed invoice back to him with a polite smile. He took the paper and pulled a portable payment terminal from his heavy tool belt. He typed in the invoice total and hit the button to process the card Terrence had left on file for the massive emergency deposit. The machine whirred for a moment, attempting to connect to the bank server to authorize the thousands of dollars required to rip up my floors. I stood perfectly still, watching the small digital screen. The contractor frowned, tapping the side of the machine as it beeped a loud, harsh warning tone. The screen flashed a bright, undeniable red message. "Declined." The contractor let out a heavy, frustrated sigh and looked up at me. "It seems Mr. Washington's card is not going through, ma'am." I smiled a sharp, brilliant smile. "That sounds exactly right." The lead contractor stares at the bright red digital screen in absolute disbelief. He taps the side of the plastic terminal with his thick thumb and forcefully swipes the credit card a second time. The machine whirs for 3 agonizing seconds before emitting the same harsh, grating warning tone. The word "declined" flashes across the display, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air between us. He lets out a heavy breath and unclips his protective safety glasses, letting them hang around his neck. His demeanor instantly shifts from accommodating professional to irritated tradesman. He looks around the massive, ruined living room at the shattered oak floorboards, the exposed concrete foundation, and his crew standing by with heavy demolition tools waiting for their next directive. "This is entirely unacceptable," the contractor says, his voice dropping an octave. "We cleared our entire morning schedule for this emergency job. I have 4 men on the clock right now and thousands of dollars in disposal fees already pending. If your husband cannot clear a basic deposit, we are stopping work immediately. And I'm telling you right now, lady, if I do not have a certified cashier check or a cleared card by the end of the day, I am putting a mechanic's lien on this property for the labor and damages." I widen my eyes and bring a hand up to my chest, perfectly mimicking the posture of a clueless, terrified housewife. "A lien," I gasp softly. "Oh, please do not do that. There must just be a simple banking error. Terrence is an investment banker. He handles millions of dollars. I am sure his bank simply flagged the large charge for fraud protection. Please just call him." The contractor scoffs loudly, completely unimpressed by my husband's supposed pedigree. He pulls his heavy, rugged smartphone from his belt and dials the number listed on the work order. He puts the call on speakerphone, holding it up in the dusty air. Terrence answers on the very first ring, his voice breathless and frantic. "Listen to me. Washington." The contractor barks, cutting off whatever excuse Terrence is trying to formulate. "Your card bounced twice. Hard decline. My crew is dropping their tools right now. You have exactly 10 minutes to get down here and pay me what you owe for the emergency dispatch and the demolition, or I am driving straight to the county clerk's office to file a lien against your deed." I can hear the sheer, unadulterated panic in Terrence's voice through the tiny speaker. A mechanic's lien is a death sentence for his entire criminal operation. A lien attaches directly to the title of the house. It would instantly trigger a massive red flag during the title search for his fraudulent cash-out refinance loan. It would alert the primary bank, freeze the transaction completely, and expose his forged documents to federal investigators before he ever got his hands on the $500,000. He is currently standing on the edge of a cliff, and the contractor just handed him an anvil. "I will be right there," Terrence shouts, his voice cracking with desperation. "Do not file anything. I am 5 minutes away. It is just a security freeze on my corporate account. I will sort it out. Just wait outside." The contractor ends the call without a single word and motions for his crew to head out to their vans. The heavy front door shuts, leaving me alone in the center of my destroyed foyer. The silence is profound. I do not move a muscle. I simply stand amidst the ruins of my expensive hardwood floors, waiting for my husband to arrive. Less than 5 minutes later, tires screech violently against the pavement of our driveway. The front door flies open and Terrence bursts into the house. He looks completely unhinged. The arrogant, polished investment banker persona has entirely evaporated. His expensive silk tie is loosened and hanging crookedly around his neck. His tailored suit jacket is wrinkled, and sweat is visibly beading along his hairline. He is breathing heavily, his eyes darting frantically around the demolished room before locking onto me. He does not even ask how I am doing. He does not apologize for the destruction of my home or the aggressive contractor waiting outside. He marches directly toward me, his face twisting into a mask of pure, desperate rage. "Where is your money?" he demands, his voice a harsh, frantic whisper. He grabs my shoulders, gripping me tight enough to bruise. "I need cash, Keisha, right now. You are always bragging about your little grant-writing hobby. You must have something saved up. I need to pay these men before they ruin my real estate portfolio." I do not fight back. I let my shoulders slump forward, completely collapsing into his aggressive grip. I force my breathing to hitch violently, drawing short, shallow gasps of air into my lungs. I let my lower lip tremble and command tears to well up in the corners of my eyes. Within seconds, hot tears are spilling down my cheeks, cutting tracks through the fine layer of sawdust on my face. I look up at him with wide, terrified eyes, playing the role of the submissive, panicked wife flawlessly. "Terrence." "I do not understand," I sob, letting my voice waver and break. "Why are they tearing up the floors? Why is your card declining? Are we in trouble? What is happening?" He shoves me backward, away from him, completely disgusted by my display of emotion. He paces across the exposed concrete, running his trembling hands over his sweating face. Stop crying and be useful for once in your life, he snarls, kicking a broken piece of oak across the room. It is a temporary liquidity issue. A massive client froze my assets for a routine audit, and these blue-collar idiots do not understand high-level finance. I am shielding you from incredibly complex corporate investments, Keisha. The least you can do is support your husband when he needs a bridge loan. Give me your savings account right now. I nod frantically, wiping the tears from my face with the back of my trembling hand. I reach into my cardigan pocket and pull out my smartphone. I sniffle loudly, unlocking the screen with shaking fingers. I will transfer my savings right now, Terrence. I weep, my voice thick with fake devastation. I will give you everything I have. Please just do not let them take the house. I open my banking application and navigate directly to the decoy account. It is a completely isolated local credit union account I set up years ago specifically for this exact scenario. I use it to pay for minor household expenses and groceries, deliberately creating a digital paper trail of a struggling middle-class earner. The screen loads, displaying a total available balance of exactly $5,000. Terrence does not wait for me to initiate the transfer. He aggressively snatches the phone right out of my hand. He stares at the glowing screen, his bloodshot eyes scanning the low number. His face contorts into a horrific sneer of pure, unadulterated contempt. He looks from the phone to me, his expression dripping with absolute disgust. $5,000, he spits out the words as if they are poison. This is it. This is all you have managed to scrape together from your pathetic little charity projects. I shrink back against the wall, letting out a pathetic little whimper. It is everything I have saved, Terrence, I whisper. I promise. You are utterly useless, he shouts, throwing his hands up in the air. 5 years of marriage, and this is what you bring to the table. Chloe makes more than this sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. My sister has more value in her left pinky finger than you have in your entire existence. He aggressively taps the screen, rapidly wiring the entire $5,000 balance directly into his own checking account. He clears out every single cent, leaving the decoy account at absolute zero. He shoves the phone back into my chest, letting it fall onto the dusty floor. He turns on his heel and storms out the front door to placate the angry contractors waiting in the driveway. The heavy mahogany door clicks shut and the lock engages. The transformation is instantaneous. The fake tears completely vanish from my face as if they were never there. My hitched breathing smooths out into slow, calculated, measured breaths. I stand up perfectly straight, rolling my shoulders back to release the feigned tension. I wipe the remaining moisture from my cheeks with a cold, steady hand. I step over my discarded phone, entirely unconcerned with the empty decoy account. I have exactly what I need. I just bought myself complete, uninterrupted access to his financial destruction. I walk purposefully down the hallway, bypassing the ruined living room entirely. I step into my private home office and lock the heavy oak door behind me. The room is soundproofed and secure. I sit down at my massive glass desk and open my encrypted executive laptop. The biometric scanner reads my fingerprint and grants me immediate access to my primary global wealth portal. I pull up the secure messaging application and open the encrypted channel to Diane Vance. She is already online waiting for my signal. Earlier this morning, when I dropped off the evidence of Terrence's massive debts, I had Diane trace the exact origin of his shady hard money lenders. Terrence owes $500,000 to a remarkably vicious collection agency that operates under a shell corporation in Nevada. They are ruthless, dangerous men who deal in broken kneecaps and hostile intimidation. But they are also businessmen, and their parent company is currently struggling with a massive liquidity crisis of their own. They are desperate for capital, making them highly susceptible to a hostile corporate takeover. Diane has already drafted the aggressive acquisition contracts. All she needs is my final authorization and the capital injection from my offshore holding firm. I open the digital contract, reviewing the aggressive terms. I am not just paying off my husband's debt. I am buying the entire agency outright. I am purchasing their loan portfolios, their collection rights, and their corporate enforcement division. I am acquiring complete legal ownership of every single contract they hold, including the violent $500,000 marker hanging directly over Terrence's head. I type a single command into the banking interface authorizing a multi-million-dollar wire transfer from my Cayman Islands corporate account directly into the acquisition escrow. I navigate to the final signature page of the hostile takeover document. I do not hesitate. I press execute. The screen flashes a brilliant, vibrant green. The confirmation code locks into the secure server. The transaction clears instantly. I sit back in my leather ergonomic chair and look out the window at the contractors' vans parked in my driveway. Terrence is currently outside sweating and begging, handing over my fake $5,000 to save his fraudulent empire. He thinks he just bullied his weak, useless wife into giving up her last dime. He thinks he is still the master of this house. He has absolutely no idea that while he was standing on my porch, I just bought his entire life. I now literally own the debt collection agency he is terrified of. The violent men threatening to break his legs by Thanksgiving no longer work for a faceless Nevada corporation. They work directly for me. I am his creditor. I am his master. And I am going to collect every single thing he owes me. I close the secure laptop and place it neatly inside my desk drawer. The satisfying click of the lock echoes in the quiet office. I take a deep breath, letting the reality of my absolute power wash over me. I am no longer a passenger in this crashing vehicle. I am driving it. Before I can even step out of my office, the heavy mahogany front door bangs open again. It is not Terrence returning from the driveway. A loud, obnoxious crash echoes through the foyer as a stack of heavy cardboard moving boxes hits the exposed concrete floor. Careful with those, Connor. My fragile crystal glasses are in that one. Chloe's shrill, demanding voice pierces the air. I step out of the hallway and walk back toward the living room. Chloe and Connor are standing amidst the sawdust and splintered oak floorboards. Chloe is wearing a pair of oversized designer sunglasses indoors and holding a counterfeit luxury tote bag. Connor is struggling under the weight of 3 more heavy moving boxes, his face red and sweating. They must have parked on the street to avoid the chaotic scene unfolding with the contractors in the driveway. They are completely oblivious to the financial bloodbath happening right outside. They genuinely believe they have arrived at their new free mansion. Connor drops the second stack of boxes with a heavy thud, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. He looks around the demolished room with a look of supreme entitlement. "It looks like a war zone in here," he complains, kicking a piece of broken wood out of his way. Terrence said the demolition crew would have everything cleared out by noon. "I cannot believe we are moving into a construction site. This dust is going to ruin my expensive sneakers." Chloe sighs dramatically, pulling down her sunglasses to glare at the mess. "It is just temporary, babe. Once the beige carpet is installed, it will feel like a real home. Terrence promised me the master suite would be completely finished by the weekend." She finally notices me standing quietly in the hallway. She does not offer a greeting. She does not acknowledge that she is standing inside a house that my name is currently on. She just looks at me with pure condescending expectation. "Oh good, Keisha, you are here," Chloe says, waving her manicured hand in my direction. "Terrence told us you would be packing up your things today. Make sure you do not take the custom curtains in the guest room. I want to use those for the nursery." Connor stretches his back, groaning loudly. He walks over to the kitchen island and slams his hand down on the marble countertop. "I am starving," he announces aggressively. "Moving boxes all morning is exhausting work. Keisha, be a doll and make me a sandwich, turkey and provolone if you have it, and grab me a cold beer from the fridge." I stare at him. The sheer audacity of this man is almost comical. He is standing in my house ordering me around like a hired maid. He is attempting to exert his dominance to prove that he belongs in this affluent environment, and I am just the discarded help. "We are family now," Keisha Connor says, leaning against the counter with an arrogant smirk. "You gotta learn to serve. After all, you will need the practice when you are out on your own trying to find a real job." I do not scream. I do not cry. I do not throw him out of my house. I just look at him with a perfectly calm, blank expression. "Of course, Connor," I say, my voice even and accommodating. "Let me get that for you right now." I walk behind the kitchen counter and open the stainless steel refrigerator. I pull out the deli meat and the cheese. I grab a loaf of fresh artisan bread and a bottle of imported beer. I move methodically and purposefully. I am in no rush. I place 2 slices of bread on a cutting board and begin assembling the sandwich. While I spread the mayonnaise and layer the turkey, my mind races through the reality of the 2 arrogant fools standing in my kitchen. For the last 3 years, Chloe and Connor have paraded around every family gathering acting like American royalty. They lease expensive foreign cars. They wear clothing dripping with flashy designer logos. Chloe constantly posts staged photos on social media, bragging about her extravagant lifestyle and her successful husband. Connor loves to boast about his high-pressure career as a regional sales director for a massive tech firm in the city. He loves to belittle my local grant writing business, telling everyone that true wealth only comes from aggressive corporate acquisitions. What my family does not know is that my multi-million-dollar consulting firm specializes in deep corporate due diligence. When I evaluate a tech startup for federal funding or venture capital, I dissect their entire financial history. I scrutinize their employee rosters, their payroll ledgers, and their quarterly earnings reports. I know exactly how to read the hidden language of corporate public filings. A month ago, a massive technology conglomerate applied for a federal grant that my firm was assessing. It happened to be the exact same company Connor worked for. Out of pure curiosity, I ran a background check on their regional sales division. I read their internal restructuring documents. I saw the unredacted termination lists. I know exactly who they are. They are not wealthy. They are drowning. They are maxed out on a dozen high-interest credit cards just to maintain the illusion of success. They are entirely dependent on Terrence pulling off this massive real estate fraud so they can live rent-free in my house while they figure out how to survive. I finish making the sandwich. I cut it diagonally into 2 perfect triangles. I place it on a ceramic plate and pop the cap off the cold beer. I pick up the plate and the bottle and walk back out to the kitchen island. Connor is currently telling Chloe where he plans to mount his massive flat-screen television in my living room. He stops talking the moment I set the plate down in front of him. He grabs the beer, taking a long, greedy swallow before picking up a half of the sandwich. "About time," he mutters, taking a massive bite. I fold my hands neatly on the marble countertop and lean forward slightly. I paste on a bright conversational smile. "Connor, it is so crazy," I say, keeping my tone light and breezy. "I was doing some administrative work this morning. I was looking at your company public filings for a potential local grant project. Did you know they just laid off the entire regional sales team?" Connor freezes. His jaw stops chewing. The color rapidly drains from his face, leaving him looking pale and sickly. The half-eaten sandwich slips from his fingers and drops onto the plate with a soft, wet thud. Chloe stops examining her manicured nails. Her head snaps up. She stares at me, her eyes wide with sudden, unfiltered terror. Her face goes completely ghost white. The arrogant sneer she wore just moments ago vanishes entirely. I tilt my head, feigning complete innocence. "Yes, I read the corporate restructuring report." I continue, my voice ringing clearly through the quiet kitchen. It stated that due to massive underperformance, the entire Midwest sales division was completely dissolved. The report was dated exactly 3 weeks ago. That must have been a terrible shock for you, Connor, to lose your job so suddenly. The silence in the room is deafening. Connor cannot speak. He just stares at me, his mouth slightly open, a piece of lettuce hanging from his lower lip. He is completely paralyzed by the exposure of his darkest secret. They had not told anyone. They had not told Miss Loretta. They certainly had not told Terrence. They had kept his termination an absolute secret, desperately clinging to their fake wealthy image. They had packed up their expensive leased apartment and rushed to move into my home because they literally had nowhere else to go. They are dead broke. Their bank accounts are empty. Their luxury cars are weeks away from being repossessed by the dealership. They are entirely and completely reliant on Terrence stealing my house to survive. And now the useless servant knows their reality. I smile gently at Connor. "It must be so stressful," I say, letting a razor-sharp edge bleed into my tone. "Trying to keep up appearances when you have absolutely zero income. Trying to play the wealthy executive while secretly depending on your brother-in-law to commit federal real estate fraud just so you have a roof over your head. It is a good thing you are moving in here today, right? Otherwise, you might end up out on the street by the end of the month. Connor swallows hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He looks at Chloe, pure panic shining in his eyes. He is completely stripped of his bravado, reduced to a terrified, unemployed fraud. Chloe steps forward, gripping the marble countertop so hard her knuckles turn bright white. Her fake designer bag slips from her shoulder and hits the floor. The shock on her face rapidly twists into sheer defensive fury. She realizes instantly that I am not the clueless victim they all thought I was. She realizes that I hold the power to destroy her entire reputation with a single phone call to her mother. She glares at me with pure, unadulterated venom. Her chest heaves as she tries to regain control of the narrative. She points a trembling finger directly at my face. "You better watch your mouth, Keisha," Chloe hisses, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "You do not know anything about us. You are just a pathetic, jealous woman losing her husband and her home. Keep your mouth shut, or I will make sure Terrence leaves you with absolutely nothing." Chloe glares at me with pure, unadulterated venom. "You better watch your mouth, Keisha," she hisses, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "You do not know anything about us. You are just a pathetic, jealous woman losing her husband and her home. Keep your mouth shut, or I will make sure Terrence leaves you with absolutely nothing." I do not flinch. I do not back away from her trembling, pointed finger. I look at her shaking hands and the sheer terror bleeding through her cheap bravado. I step closer, forcing her to press her back against the stainless steel refrigerator. I smile, letting my eyes go completely dead. "You are standing in my kitchen, Chloe," I say softly, dropping the subservient tone entirely. "You are eating food bought with my money. Your husband just lost his job, and you are both entirely dependent on the man currently having a nervous breakdown in his home office. I suggest you watch your tone before I decide to kick you out into the street tonight." I turn and leave them standing in the kitchen, completely paralyzed by their own pathetic reality. Connor does not pick up his sandwich. Chloe does not say another word. 3 days until Thanksgiving. The house is still a chaotic disaster zone. The grand foyer and the living room are stripped down to the bare, uneven concrete foundation. There is a persistent layer of fine oak sawdust coating the walls, the picture frames, and the expensive light fixtures. Terrence fired the initial demolition crew after his credit card was declined, claiming to his mother that he found a much cheaper, more reliable crew that would arrive by the weekend. Of course, no new crew ever materialized because Terrence has absolutely no money to pay them. He is completely tapped out, running on empty fumes and desperate lies. Despite the absolute state of the house, Miss Loretta has practically moved in. She arrives at 8 in the morning every single day, treating my ruined home like her personal kingdom. She ignores the dust and the concrete, acting as if the beige carpet is already installed. She brings heavy cardboard boxes filled with her gaudy gold-rimmed floral china and demands I unpack them carefully. She insists that Thanksgiving must be perfect. Currently, I am on my hands and knees in the dining room, holding a damp rag and a bucket of warm, soapy water. Miss Loretta stands over me, holding a delicate teacup and saucer. She points her manicured finger toward the floor molding near the entryway. "You missed a spot right there, Keisha," she commands, her shrill voice echoing off the bare concrete floor. "Put some elbow grease into it. A house is a direct reflection of the wife. Right now, this place looks like a complete and utter disaster. I do not know how Terrence puts up with this level of incompetence." I do not argue. I crawl over to the section of the baseboard she pointed at and scrub the wood obediently. Miss Loretta walks past me to place her teacup on the sideboard. As she passes, she deliberately steps her heavy, hard-soled shoe right onto the damp baseboard I just polished, leaving a dark, ugly scuff mark on the white paint. She does not apologize. She stops and looks down at me, her hands resting on her hips. "A woman's worth is determined entirely by how well she serves her man's family," she preaches, looking at me with pure disdain. "Terrence works himself to the bone to provide this luxurious lifestyle for you. The absolute least you can do is keep his home pristine for the holidays. He needs a soft place to land, not a lazy, ungrateful wife. I look at the black scuff mark on the pristine white baseboard. The physical disrespect is so casual, so deeply ingrained in her nature. My mind instantly flashes back to the day of my bridal shower 5 years ago. I had rented out a beautiful private room at an upscale country club for 50 of my closest friends and professional colleagues. I paid for the catered lunch, the expensive champagne, and the custom floral arrangements entirely myself. But Miss Loretta spent the entire afternoon acting like she was the generous, wealthy host, gracefully blessing my friends with her presence. She had waited until I was sitting in the center of the room, opening gifts, surrounded by my successful, accomplished bridesmaids. She walked up to the front of the room, grabbed the microphone from the stand, and offered a toast. She looked out at my friends with a tight, sugary smile dripping with condescension. "We are just so thrilled to welcome Keisha into the Washington family," she had announced, her voice carrying loudly over the speakers, echoing through the elegant room. I always worried about who Terrence would choose. He is such a handsome, successful man with such a bright future. We always thought he would bring home a doctor or a lawyer. But I tell you, we are just so lucky he settled for a girl of Keisha's complexion. It shows he really looks past the surface and sees the heart. The entire room had frozen in horrified silence. My friends stared at her in absolute shock. Diane, who was sitting at the front table, had nearly snapped the stem of her champagne flute. Miss Loretta had weaponized my dark skin, trying to publicly humiliate me in front of my own support system. She wanted to remind me that I was somehow beneath her light-skinned golden child son. She wanted me to feel eternally grateful that Terrence had lowered his standards to marry someone like me. I had forced a smile that day, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper just to keep the peace. I swallowed the thick, bitter taste of her colorism and prejudice because I foolishly believed love meant enduring the flaws of your partner's family. I thought silence was the price of admission to a happy marriage. Now, kneeling on the hard concrete of my own dining room, I realize exactly how pathetic that mentality was. I do not scrub the scuff mark away. I leave it there as a reminder. I stand up slowly, dropping the damp rag into the soapy water. I wipe my hands on my apron and look around my home. Miss Loretta is busy arranging her ridiculous floral plates on my mahogany dining table, humming a gospel hymn, completely satisfied with her attempts to degrade me. Down the hallway, Terrence is locked in his home office, desperately making hushed, panicked phone calls. I can hear the frantic edge in his voice as he tries to secure a high-interest bridge loan to cover his massive ballooning debt. He is calling loan sharks and shady brokers, trying to find $500,000 before Thanksgiving. He still does not know that I executed a hostile corporate takeover. He does not know that I own the exact debt collection agency he is terrified of. Upstairs, Chloe and Connor are hiding in the guest room. They have barely come out since our confrontation in the kitchen. They are terrified of the outside world, terrified that Terrence will find out Connor is unemployed and completely useless. They are whispering aggressively to each other, formulating desperate lies to maintain their fake wealthy image. The entire Washington family is a hollow, rotting tree. They are all gathered together right here inside the wood chipper, completely blind to the blades. I walk over to the dining table and smooth down the edge of the linen tablecloth. I look at Miss Loretta, watching her meticulously align a gravy boat with the center of the table. She wants this Thanksgiving to be a massive showcase of her dominance. She wants to sit at the head of the table and pretend she is the matriarch of a wealthy, powerful dynasty. She wants to feast on my dime and revel in my subjugation. "You are absolutely right, Loretta," I say smoothly, my voice calm and perfectly respectful. This house is a direct reflection of the family. And considering all the wonderful new changes Terrence is making for Chloe, I have arranged for a very special guest to come bless the house for Thanksgiving dinner. I spoke with Pastor Jenkins from your church, and he has agreed to join us. Miss Loretta stops arranging the plates. She turns to look at me, her eyes wide with pleasant surprise. She puffs her chest out with immense pride, absolutely thrilled by the prospect of showing off this massive house to her respected pastor. She smiles a genuine greedy smile, envisioning the social capital she will gain at Sunday service. "That is wonderful, Keisha," she says, her tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "Finally, you do something right. The pastor will be so impressed with what Terrence has provided for us." She turns back to the table, polishing a crystal glass with her sleeve. She has no idea what is actually coming. She is totally unaware that alongside the good pastor, I have also invited two very specific guests of my own. Guests who are going to rip the meticulously crafted facade right off the Washington family and burn their fake empire to the ground. I am going to serve them a Thanksgiving dinner they will never forget. The smell of roasted sage turkey and expensive imported cigars hangs heavy in the air. Thanksgiving Day has arrived, and 40 members of the extended Washington family have descended upon my property like a plague of well-dressed locusts. They parked their massive SUVs and luxury sedans haphazardly across my driveway and directly onto my freshly manicured front lawn, tearing deep, muddy tracks into the grass. Inside the house, the scene is a surreal display of arrogant delusion. The grand foyer and the sprawling living room are still completely stripped down to the bare, uneven concrete foundation. There is a persistent layer of fine oak sawdust clinging to the edges of the room. Yet Miss Loretta has desperately attempted to mask the financial devastation of her son. She covered the exposed concrete with cheap, oversized beige area rugs and set up long rented folding tables draped in pristine white linen. She is currently gliding through the room in a ridiculous floor-length sequined gown, acting as if she is hosting an exclusive charity gala at a historic estate. She holds a crystal glass of sparkling cider, pointing her long, manicured fingers to direct cousins and aunts on where to place their coats. "Welcome to Terrence's massive real estate triumph," she announces loudly to anyone who walks through the front door. He is completely remodeling the entire first floor. It is going to be imported Italian marble all the way through. We are just dealing with the industrial chic look for the holidays. The relatives nod and coo in admiration, completely buying into the lie. Terrence stands by a rented mahogany bar setup in the corner, holding court with his uncles. He is wearing a custom-tailored three-piece suit and sipping from a heavy crystal tumbler of Macallan 25 that he undoubtedly charged to a maxed-out corporate credit card. He is laughing loudly, his head thrown back, completely ignoring my existence. I walk past him balancing a heavy silver tray of hot appetizers, and he literally takes a step backward, forcing me to abruptly alter my path to avoid dropping the food. He does not excuse himself. He does not even look at me. He just continues bragging to Uncle Marcus about his supposedly untouchable $1 million investment portfolio and his aggressive expansion into commercial real estate. He is projecting the image of a wealthy, untouchable king. He is banking entirely on that fraudulent $500,000 equity loan clearing his account. He has absolutely no idea that I acquired the debt collection agency holding his original marker. He has no idea that the ruthless men he owes money to now report directly to me. I weave through the crowd of laughing relatives, keeping my posture perfectly subservient and my expression entirely blank. Aunts and cousins I have known for 5 years hand me their empty cocktail glasses and dirty napkins without even making eye contact, treating me like hired catering staff in my own home. I accept the trash with a polite nod and carry the tray back down the hallway, retreating into the stifling heat of the kitchen. The noise of the party dulls as the heavy swinging door shuts behind me. The kitchen is a chaotic mess of roasting pans, boiling pots, and steaming vegetables. I stand over the massive roasted turkey, resting on the granite island, gripping an electric carving knife. The mechanical hum of the blade vibrates through my hand as I methodically slice the white meat into perfect uniform portions. I stare down at the roasted bird and let the repetitive motion ground me. I reflect on every single Thanksgiving I have spent with the Washington family. I remember the very first year we were married. I had spent 3 days preparing a massive feast, wanting to impress his relatives. When dinner was served, Terrence had publicly directed me to sit at a small folding table near the kitchen door rather than the main dining table. He had smiled that charming, arrogant smile and told the entire family that my place on holidays was close to the stove because the Washington family expected a certain level of traditional service. He had humiliated me to elevate his own status. He had demanded my servitude to prove his dominance. Today, I am playing the role of the dutiful servant for the very absolute last time. The kitchen door swings open with a loud, forceful creak. Chloe struts into the room wearing a bright crimson silk blouse and carrying an empty wine glass. Connor trails half a step behind her. He looks incredibly nervous, his eyes darting toward me and then quickly away. He is sweating through his expensive dress shirt, terrified that I might expose his secret unemployment to the room full of relatives outside. But Chloe is emboldened by the presence of her entire family. She feels invincible, surrounded by the Washington clan. She walks directly up to the kitchen island and deliberately bumps her hip hard against mine. The physical impact jolts my arm, forcing the electric carving knife to scrape harshly against the cutting board. I turn off the knife and look at her. "Do not mess this up, Keisha," Chloe hisses, her voice dropping into a nasty, condescending whisper. "My mother has worked too hard to make this day perfect, and you are moving too slow. The guests are hungry." She reaches out and pinches a piece of carved turkey breast from the platter, popping it into her mouth and chewing loudly. She looks around my kitchen with a possessive, greedy gleam in her eyes. "You need to start packing your boxes tomorrow," she continues, wiping a smudge of grease from her lips. "Connor and I have decided we are taking the master suite upstairs. It has the best natural light for my morning yoga routine. After today, Terrence is officially making this our permanent residence. My brother is finally taking control of his assets like a real man." Connor shifts his weight uncomfortably, looking toward the kitchen door as if preparing to bolt. "Come on, Chloe," he mutters softly. "Let us just go back to the party." "Oh. Shut up, Connor," Chloe snaps, waving him off without breaking eye contact with me. "I'm just making sure the help understands the new hierarchy." She leans closer to me, her perfume smelling sharp and overwhelming in the hot kitchen. "You will be lucky if we let you stay in the basement, Keisha. I hear it is damp down there, but it is perfectly suited for someone of your status." I look at her flushed, arrogant face. I look at Connor trembling in the background, a pathetic, unemployed man entirely dependent on a collapsing fraud. They have absolutely no idea what is happening around them. They do not know that Pastor Jenkins has just arrived and is currently shaking hands with Miss Loretta in the foyer, preparing to bless a home they do not own. They do not know that two men in dark suits are sitting in an unmarked black sedan, parked 3 houses down the street, waiting for my signal. They do not know that the fraudulent deed Terrence filed with the county was intercepted by federal investigators 48 hours ago. They are standing on a trapdoor and actively demanding that I pull the lever. I place the electric carving knife down on the granite counter. The metal clinks softly against the stone. I reach out and pull a clean white cotton towel from the oven handle. I take my time. I slowly and methodically wipe the turkey grease from my fingers, making sure every inch of my skin is perfectly clean. I fold the towel neatly and place it beside the platter. I roll my shoulders back and lift my chin, dropping the subservient posture I have worn all day. I look directly into Chloe's eyes and let a cold, brilliant smile stretch across my face. "Oh, Chloe," I say, my voice perfectly smooth and ringing with absolute lethal authority. "I think you are going to love the basement. In fact, I have a video of it I want to show everyone right now." I leave Chloe standing in the kitchen, completely paralyzed by her own fabricated reality, and push my way through the heavy swinging door into the great room. The sheer volume of the Washington family is instantly overwhelming. Thanksgiving Day has arrived, and 40 members of the extended family have descended upon my property like a plague of well-dressed locusts. They parked their massive SUVs and leased luxury sedans haphazardly across my driveway and directly onto my freshly manicured front lawn, tearing deep, muddy tracks into the grass. Inside the house, the scene is a surreal display of arrogant delusion. The grand foyer and the sprawling living room are still completely stripped down to the bare, uneven concrete foundation. There is a persistent layer of fine oak sawdust clinging to the edges of the room, covering the baseboards and floating in the air. Yet Miss Loretta has desperately attempted to mask the financial devastation of her son. She covered the exposed concrete with cheap, oversized beige area rugs and set up long rented folding tables draped in pristine white linen. She is currently gliding through the room in a ridiculous floor-length sequined gown, acting as if she is hosting an exclusive charity gala at a historic estate rather than a dinner in a demolished construction zone. She holds a crystal glass of sparkling cider, pointing her long manicured fingers to direct cousins and aunts on where to place their heavy winter coats. "Welcome to Terrence's massive real estate triumph," she announces loudly to anyone who walks through the front door. He is completely remodeling the entire first floor. It is going to be imported Italian marble all the way through. We are just dealing with the industrial chic look for the holidays. The relatives nod and coo in admiration, completely buying into the lie. Terrence stands by a rented mahogany bar setup in the far corner holding court with his uncles. He is wearing a custom-tailored three-piece suit and sipping from a heavy crystal tumbler of Macallan 25 that he undoubtedly charged to a maxed-out corporate credit card. He is laughing loudly, his head thrown back, completely ignoring my existence. I walk past him balancing a heavy silver tray of hot appetizers, and he literally takes a step backward, forcing me to abruptly alter my path to avoid dropping the food. He does not excuse himself. He does not even look at me. He just continues bragging to Uncle Marcus about his supposedly untouchable $1 million investment portfolio and his aggressive expansion into commercial real estate. He is projecting the image of a wealthy, untouchable king. He is banking entirely on that fraudulent $500,000 equity loan clearing his account by the end of the week. He has absolutely no idea that I acquired the debt collection agency holding his original marker. He has no idea that the ruthless men he owes money to now report directly to me. I weave through the crowd of laughing relatives, keeping my posture perfectly subservient and my expression entirely blank. Aunts and cousins I have known for 5 years hand me their empty cocktail glasses and dirty napkins without even making eye contact, treating me like hired catering staff in my own home. I accept the trash with a polite nod and carry the tray back down the hallway, retreating into the stifling heat of the kitchen. The noise of the party dulls as the door shuts behind me. The kitchen is a chaotic mess of roasting pans, boiling pots, and steaming vegetables. I stand over the massive roasted turkey resting on the granite island, gripping an electric carving knife. The mechanical hum of the blade vibrates through my hand as I methodically slice the white meat into perfect uniform portions. I stare down at the roasted bird and let the repetitive motion ground me. I reflect on every single Thanksgiving I have spent with the Washington family. I remember the very first year we were married. I had spent 3 days preparing a massive feast, wanting to impress his relatives. When dinner was served, Terrence had publicly directed me to sit at a small folding table near the kitchen door rather than the main dining table. He had smiled that charming, arrogant smile and told the entire family that my place on holidays was close to the stove because the Washington family expected a certain level of traditional service. He had humiliated me to elevate his own status. He had demanded my servitude to prove his dominance. Today I am playing the role of the dutiful servant for the very absolute last time. The kitchen door swings open with a loud, forceful creak. Chloe struts into the room wearing a bright crimson silk blouse and carrying an empty wine glass. Connor trails half a step behind her. He looks incredibly nervous, his eyes darting toward me and then quickly away. He is sweating through his expensive dress shirt, terrified that I might expose his secret unemployment to the room full of relatives outside. But Chloe is emboldened by the presence of her entire family. She feels invincible, surrounded by the Washington clan. She walks directly up to the kitchen island and deliberately bumps her hip hard against mine. The physical impact jolts my arm, forcing the electric carving knife to scrape harshly against the cutting board. I turn off the knife and look at her. "Do not mess this up, Keisha," Chloe hisses, her voice dropping into a nasty, condescending whisper. "My mother has worked too hard to make this day perfect, and you are moving too slow. The guests are hungry." She reaches out and pinches a piece of carved turkey breast from the platter, popping it into her mouth and chewing loudly. She looks around my kitchen with a possessive, greedy gleam in her eyes. "After today, Terrence is officially making this our permanent residence," she continues, wiping a smudge of grease from her lips. "Connor and I are taking the master suite upstairs. It has the best natural light. You will be lucky if we let you stay in the basement, Keisha. I hear it is damp down there, but it is perfectly suited for someone of your status. I look at her flushed, arrogant face. I look at Connor trembling in the background, a pathetic, unemployed man entirely dependent on a collapsing fraud. They have absolutely no idea what is happening around them. They do not know that Pastor Jenkins has just arrived and is currently shaking hands with Miss Loretta in the foyer, preparing to bless a home they do not own. They do not know that two men in dark suits are sitting in an unmarked black sedan, parked 3 houses down the street, waiting for my signal. They do not know that the fraudulent deed Terrence filed with the county was intercepted by federal investigators 48 hours ago. They are standing on a trap door and actively demanding that I pull the lever. I place the electric carving knife down on the granite counter. The metal clinks softly against the stone. I reach out and pull a clean white cotton towel from the oven handle. I take my time. I slowly and methodically wipe the turkey grease from my fingers, making sure every inch of my skin is perfectly clean. I fold the towel neatly and place it beside the platter. I roll my shoulders back and lift my chin, dropping the subservient posture I have worn all day. I look directly into Chloe's eyes and let a cold, brilliant smile stretch across my face. "Oh, Chloe," I say, my voice perfectly smooth and ringing with absolute lethal authority. "I think you are going to love the basement. In fact, I have a video of it I want to show everyone right now." I leave her standing completely speechless by the island and walk out the swinging door into the great room. The guests are beginning to take their seats around the long rented tables. At the absolute center of the main table sits Pastor Jenkins. He is a dignified older man wearing a sharp charcoal suit, looking slightly bewildered by the industrial demolition zone he has been invited to bless. To his immediate right sits Miss Loretta, practically vibrating with narcissistic energy. Terrence is at the head of the table, holding his fresh scotch, projecting the aura of a benevolent billionaire. I stand near the massive 85-inch smart television mounted on the only wall that survived the demolition crew. I fold my hands in front of my apron, maintaining a perfectly composed mask. Miss Loretta stands up and picks up her crystal glass. She taps a silver spoon against the rim. The sharp ringing sound slices through the chatter, instantly silencing the 40 extended family members. Every eye in the room turns toward her. "Family," Miss Loretta begins, her voice booming across the concrete room with theatrical grandiosity. "We are gathered here today to celebrate our immense blessings." As I look around this room, I see the strength and the undeniable prestige of the Washington bloodline. We are a family of achievers. We are a family of leaders. She pauses, letting her gaze sweep over the tables, completely ignoring me standing in the corner. She looks lovingly at Terrence, who raises his scotch glass to her in a silent, arrogant salute. "I want to propose a toast to my brilliant, successful son Terrence," she announces, projecting her voice so the pastor can hear every single word clearly. "Terrence has worked tirelessly to build an empire, and today we celebrate his ultimate triumph. He has purchased this magnificent home for our family legacy. He is currently transforming this space into a palace that reflects our refined tastes. He is a true provider, stepping up to be the man of this house, taking absolute control of his assets." The family erupts into loud, enthusiastic applause. Aunts and uncles clap their hands and cheer. Terrence smirks, taking a long, slow sip of his expensive liquor. He looks at me over the rim of his glass, his eyes dark and mocking, daring me to speak up and ruin his glorious moment. He fully expects me to lower my head and accept my place at the bottom of his newly established hierarchy. But Miss Loretta is not finished. She holds up her hand, demanding silence once again. "And because Terrence is such a generous, devoted brother, I have an incredibly special announcement," she continues, practically beaming with joy. "He has decided to open this beautiful, massive home to his sister. Starting today, Chloe and Connor will be moving in permanently. They will be taking over the master suite upstairs, ensuring that this family legacy remains close-knit and strong." The applause is even louder this time. Cousins cheer for Chloe, who sits perfectly still, her knuckles white as she grips the edge of the folding table. Connor looks like he might physically be sick. They are receiving a standing ovation for successfully leeching off a fraudulent real estate scam. Terrence sets his glass down and smiles at his mother. He looks over at me expecting to see tears. He expects to see a broken, defeated woman who just realized she has been officially replaced in her own home. I do not cry. I do not flinch. I stand perfectly still, letting their applause die down until the room is completely silent, waiting for Pastor Jenkins to deliver the blessing. I reach into the deep pocket of my cardigan and pull out the sleek black remote control for the smart television. I grip the smooth plastic, feeling the immense weight of the power I currently hold. "Excuse me," I say, my voice ringing loud, clear, and absolutely unwavering. The entire room turns to look at me. Miss Loretta glares, her face twisting with immediate annoyance at my interruption. Terrence narrows his eyes, his jaw clenching as he senses a slight deviation from his carefully orchestrated script. Pastor Jenkins looks at me with polite expectation. Before we eat, I continue stepping away from the wall and walking slowly toward the head of the table. Before Pastor Jenkins blesses this food and this home, I want to add to Loretta's beautiful toast. I prepared a short video to truly celebrate this specific family legacy. Terrence frowns heavily. "Video?" he asks, his voice sharp and demanding. "What video, Keisha? We do not have time for your little projects right now. The food is getting cold." "Oh, I promise, Terrence," I say, flashing him a cold, brilliant smile. "This will not take long at all." Before he can stand up or object, I point the remote directly at the television and press the play button. The massive 85-inch screen instantly powers on, bathing the dimly lit, dusty room in a harsh, bright glow. The screen does not show a slideshow of happy family memories. It shows grainy, high-definition night vision security footage. The camera angle is positioned perfectly from the top corner of Terrence's soundproofed home office. The date and timestamp in the bottom corner indicate the footage was recorded exactly 4 weeks ago at 2 in the morning. The room falls completely dead silent. 40 people hold their breath, staring at the massive screen in absolute confusion. On the television, Terrence and Miss Loretta are sitting together on the leather sofa in his office. They are drinking wine and looking over a stack of legal documents. The surround sound system kicks in, broadcasting their hushed conspiratorial voices with crystal-clear digital perfection. "I cannot believe she actually bought it." Terrence's voice booms through the speakers, bouncing off the bare concrete walls of the living room. "She signed the preliminary paperwork, thinking it was a tax document." On the screen, Miss Loretta laughs, a cruel, vicious sound that makes the aunts and uncles sitting at the tables physically flinch. She has always been naive. Terrence, Miss Loretta's voice echoes through the room, filling the silence with absolute venom. "You just need to push this final cash-out refinance through the bank. Once you force her name off the deed, you take the $500,000 and we finally get rid of her." Terrence leans back on the sofa, taking a sip of his wine. "I cannot wait," he says, his digital voice dripping with pure disgust. "I am so tired of looking at her. She is too dark, too stubborn, and completely useless. I should have never married outside of our circle." Miss Loretta nods enthusiastically, patting her son's knee. "I told you that 5 years ago," she replies, her voice echoing with unmistakable colorism and malice. "You settled for a girl of her complexion because you thought she would be submissive. But she is just a burden. Once the bank clears the loan, you evict her. She will be out on the street with absolutely nothing, and you can finally move Chloe and Connor into the house like we planned." The video cuts to black. The television screen goes completely dark. The silence that descends upon the great room is not just quiet. It is a heavy, suffocating, absolute void. It is the sound of a bomb detonating, leaving nothing but a massive ringing vacuum in its wake. I stand perfectly still, the remote control hanging loosely at my side. I look around the room. Pastor Jenkins is staring at the blank television screen, his mouth completely agape, his hands frozen halfway in the gesture of prayer. He slowly turns his head to look at Miss Loretta, his expression morphing from shock to absolute moral revulsion. The 40 extended family members are paralyzed. Uncles are staring at Terrence with wide, horrified eyes. Aunts are looking at Miss Loretta as if she has just physically transformed into a monster. The entire facade of the wealthy, righteous Washington dynasty has been instantly and violently vaporized. They have just watched their beloved golden boy and their respected matriarch explicitly confess to federal wire fraud, real estate theft, and vicious, unapologetic bigotry. Miss Loretta is gripping the edge of the folding table so hard the entire structure is shaking. The color has entirely drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly and hollow. The sequined gown suddenly looks ridiculous and pathetic. She opens her mouth to speak, to formulate a lie, to deflect the blame, but no sound comes out. Her throat is completely constricted by the undeniable exposure of her true nature. Terence is entirely rigid. His expensive Scotch glass slips from his fingers and shatters violently against the concrete floor, sending sharp shards of crystal and amber liquid flying across the beige rug. The sharp sound breaks the spell, paralyzing the room. He stares at me, his eyes wide with a manic, desperate terror. The arrogant, polished investment banker is completely gone. He is just a broke, desperate fraudster standing in the ruins of a home he does not own, surrounded by the shattered pieces of his fake life. He knows the footage is real. He knows his entire criminal enterprise has just been broadcast to everyone he has ever sought to impress. The collective gasp that erupts from the 40 extended family members sounds like all the oxygen being violently sucked from the room. Pastor Jenkins drops his heavy silver fork. It clatters loudly against his fine china plate, sending a sharp ringing noise through the stunned silence. The absolute moral revulsion on the pastor's face mirrors the horrified expressions of every single aunt, uncle, and cousin sitting at the rented tables. They are staring at the massive screen, watching their beloved matriarch and their golden boy casually plot to destroy my life based on pure, unapologetic bigotry and greed. Terence completely snaps out of his paralyzed state. His face flushes a dark, violent crimson as the reality of his exposure sets in. He lets out a guttural sound of panic and lunges across the room toward the television. He knocks over a folding chair in his desperate scramble to reach the power cord. Before his hands can even graze the screen, I press the pause button on my remote control. The high-definition image freezes perfectly. Terence's and Miss Loretta's faces are immortalized on the massive screen, caught mid-laugh as they discuss my eviction. Their digital guilt hangs directly over the Thanksgiving turkey for the entire family to witness. Miss Loretta suddenly finds her voice. She jumps up from her seat at the head of the table, practically knocking Pastor Jenkins sideways. She clutches the thick string of pearls at her neck, her chest heaving with desperate, frantic breaths. "That is fake!" she screams, her voice cracking and pitching into a hysterical shriek. She points a manicured finger at me, her hand trembling so violently her bracelets rattle. She manipulated that video. It is a deep fake. She is nothing but an ugly, lying college dropout trying to ruin my successful son because she is jealous of our family. Do not look at that screen. Look at her. She is a fraud. I do not raise my voice. I do not defend myself against her pathetic, desperate insults. I simply step forward, keeping my posture perfectly straight and my expression entirely calm. I walk over to my large leather tote bag, resting on a side chair. I reach inside and pull out a massive, thick stack of heavy manila folders. I walk back to the dining table and drop them directly onto the pristine white linen right next to Miss Loretta's crystal glass. The heavy thud makes the silverware rattle and completely silences her hysterical screaming. "Actually, Loretta," I say, keeping my tone deadly smooth and ringing with absolute authority, "I did not drop out. I graduated summa cum laude. I am the founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporate consulting firm. I evaluate federal grants and perform deep corporate due diligence for venture capital acquisitions. That is exactly how I bought this house in cash 5 years ago. My name is the only name on the original deed. Terence does not own this property, he never has." A collective murmur of absolute shock ripples through the seated relatives. Uncle Marcus stares at me, his jaw practically on the floor. I tap the thick stack of folders with my index finger, drawing everyone's attention to the documents. "And these," I continue, my voice echoing off the bare concrete walls, "are the forged power of attorney documents Terence submitted to the bank yesterday morning. These contain the fake signatures he used to try and steal my home through a fraudulent cash-out refinance loan. I also included the unredacted digital trail showing exactly how he planned to funnel the $500,000 into his collapsing offshore shell companies. He is not a wealthy investment banker. He is broke, and he is a criminal. Terrence steps away from the frozen television screen. The manic panic in his eyes shifts instantly into pure dark aggression. His hands ball into tight, white-knuckled fists at his sides. The veins in his neck bulge against his expensive silk collar. The facade of the charming wealthy provider has been completely stripped away, leaving nothing but a desperate, cornered animal. He takes a slow, menacing step toward me, completely ignoring the 40 witnesses sitting around us. "You psychotic!" He starts, his voice a low, dangerous growl vibrating with violent intent. Before he can take another step toward me, the heavy brass doorbell chimes. The cheerful, melodic sound cuts through the thick, toxic tension in the room like a sharp blade. No one moves. The relatives sit frozen in their chairs, terrified to breathe. I do not wait for the chime to ring twice. I press a button on my smartphone, unlocking the smart lock on the front door. The heavy mahogany door swings open. Two uniformed police officers step directly into the dusty foyer. They are accompanied by Diane Vance, my ruthless corporate attorney, who is wearing a sharp, tailored suit and holding a thick leather briefcase. The red and blue lights from the police cruisers parked on the street flash through the front windows, painting the sawdust-covered walls in harsh, alternating colors. Diane steps into the great room, her eyes immediately sweeping over the chaotic scene. She registers the 40 stunned relatives, the frozen surveillance video on the television, and Terrence standing with his fists clenched. She does not miss a beat. She marches directly up to Terrence, radiating absolute professional authority. "Terrence Washington." Diane says, her voice slicing through the thick air. She pulls a thick stack of stapled papers from her briefcase and shoves them forcefully against his chest. "You are being formally served with divorce papers, a restraining order, and a notice of immediate eviction from this premises. Furthermore, these officers are here to escort you to the precinct regarding the $500,000 federal wire fraud investigation." The room descends into absolute pandemonium. Aunts and cousins scramble backward away from the tables, knocking over chairs in their desperate rush to distance themselves from Terrence. Uncle Marcus grabs his heavy winter coat from the rack and physically backs away toward the kitchen door. The two police officers step forward, flanking Terrence on either side. They grasp his arms firmly, pulling his hands behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs echoing through the room is the final undeniable nail in the coffin of the Washington family empire. The commotion and the flashing police lights draw Chloe and Connor out of their hiding spot. They come rushing down the stairs from the guest room, their eyes wide with confusion. Chloe stops dead on the bottom step. She takes one look at her brother in handcuffs, the police officers in the foyer, and the frozen video of her mother plotting a felony on the massive television. Instead of rushing to support her family, Chloe instantly turns her sheer terror and panic onto her husband. She spins around and shoves Connor hard in the chest, nearly knocking him off balance. "This is your fault!" she screams hysterically, her voice cracking with pure selfish desperation. "You got fired. You brought us here to live off my brother. We are broke, Connor. We have absolutely nothing, and now we are going to be homeless." Connor shrinks back against the staircase railing, completely humiliated in front of the entire extended family. He cannot deny his unemployment. He cannot defend his fabricated wealth. He just stands there looking like a pathetic, broken man, while his wife berates him in front of a dozen police officers and relatives. Miss Loretta realizes the absolute total collapse of her grand dynasty. Her golden child is going to federal prison. Her daughter is broke and homeless. Her entire social standing has been publicly obliterated in front of her beloved pastor and her extended family. She cannot manipulate her way out of this, so she resorts to her final desperate tactic. She clutches her chest with both hands, her face contorting into a mask of pure agony. She lets out a theatrical, piercing gasp that sounds like a dying bird and collapses dramatically onto the beige rented rug. "My heart," she wails, closing her eyes and going completely limp on the floor. A few relatives gasp in alarm, but no one rushes to her side. The front door is still standing wide open. Right on cue, two paramedics walk casually into the dusty foyer carrying heavy medical bags. I had called the non-emergency dispatch line an hour ago, requesting a standby unit for a highly stressful family intervention involving elderly relatives with a history of theatrics. One paramedic kneels beside Miss Loretta on the rug. He checks her pulse, shining a small bright penlight into her tightly squeezed eyes. He watches her chest rise and fall in a steady, even rhythm. He sits back on his heels and lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh, completely unimpressed by her performance. "She is perfectly fine," the paramedic announces, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "Her vitals are completely normal. Her heart rate is stable. It is just a panic attack. She is faking it." Miss Loretta's eyes snap open, burning with pure rage, but she stays on the floor too humiliated to stand up and face the judgment of the room. I look down at my soon-to-be ex-husband, who is currently being physically marched toward the front door by the police officers. I look at my racist, manipulative mother-in-law lying on the floor in her sequined gown, faking a medical emergency to avoid accountability. I look at my entitled sister-in-law sobbing on the staircase over her ruined fake life. I take a deep breath, letting the clean, cold air from the open front door fill my lungs. "You have exactly 15 minutes to get off my property," I say, my voice completely devoid of emotion, echoing off the bare concrete walls. I turn my gaze toward the staircase, where Connor is standing frozen in shock. "And Connor, do not forget your box of baby clothes in the dirt." The morning sun spills across the pristine flagstone of my back patio, casting long golden shadows across the freshly manicured lawn. I lean back in a plush outdoor lounge chair, holding a heavy ceramic mug of dark roast coffee. The steam rises in the cool May air, carrying the rich scent of the expensive beans I now import directly from Costa Rica. I take a slow, deliberate sip, allowing the quiet, absolute peace of the morning to wash over me. Exactly 6 months have passed since Thanksgiving Day. 6 months since the Washington family dynasty violently collapsed under the crushing weight of their own criminal arrogance. I look up at the rear facade of my magnificent home. There is no more fine oak sawdust clinging to the windowsills. There are no more exposed concrete floors or cheap beige rented area rugs. The grand house is completely finished, and it is breathtaking. I hired a new elite construction crew the very Monday following the eviction and paid them out of my own legitimate business accounts. The Italian marble that Terrence had loudly bragged to his uncles about now actually lines my grand foyer. Custom mahogany panels stretch across the restored living room, and a massive crystal chandelier hangs from the vaulted ceiling. Every single square inch of this property reflects my hard work, my vision, and my undeniable ownership. The silence that fills the property is no longer the suffocating heavy quiet of an unhappy marriage. It is the brilliant light silence of total absolute freedom. I rest my coffee mug on the glass patio table and reflect on the spectacular permanent downfall of Terrence Washington. He is currently sitting in a federal holding facility awaiting trial for a staggering list of charges. Wire fraud, identity theft, bank fraud, and attempting to secure a massive loan through illicitly forged documents are just the beginning of his legal nightmare. I attended his initial bail hearing 2 months ago. It was a remarkable scene. Terrence shuffled into the federal courtroom, wearing a bright orange jumpsuit with his wrists and ankles shackled in heavy chains. He looked gaunt, exhausted, and completely stripped of his arrogant charm. Because I had officially frozen all of our marital assets, and the federal government had seized his fraudulent offshore shell companies, he could not afford the high-powered defense attorneys he used to play golf with. He stood before the federal judge, represented by an overworked, exhausted public defender who looked entirely out of his depth. When the prosecutor laid out the undeniable paper trail of his financial crimes, including the pristine night vision video footage I had surrendered to the authorities, the judge immediately denied him bail, citing him as an extreme flight risk. As the marshals grabbed his arms to lead him back to his cell, Terrence had twisted around, searching the gallery. His eyes had locked onto mine, pleading, begging for a lifeline that he had spent 5 years actively destroying. I had simply held his gaze, my expression entirely blank, and watched the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swing shut behind him. His mother suffered an equally devastating but distinctly social execution. Miss Loretta had spent decades cultivating the image of the flawless, wealthy matriarch, lording her fabricated status over everyone she met. That illusion was entirely vaporized the moment Pastor Jenkins walked out of my house on Thanksgiving Day. The pastor did not keep the shocking revelation to himself. He immediately called an emergency meeting with the church elders. Within 48 hours, the entire congregation knew that the respected Miss Loretta Washington had actively conspired to steal from her own daughter-in-law and had proudly spewed vile racist rhetoric while drinking wine in a stolen home. She was politely but firmly ousted from the church council. The prestigious women she used to host for afternoon tea completely severed all ties, treating her like a highly contagious disease. She lost the country club, she lost her audience, she lost her power, with Terrence's fraudulent funds entirely cut off. Miss Loretta was forced to quickly sell her oversized leased vehicle and move into a tiny, deeply unremarkable senior apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. She has absolutely nothing left but her gaudy gold-rimmed floral china and the deafening silence of her empty social calendar. And then there are Chloe and Connor, the entitled sister-in-law who had demanded the master suite, and the unemployed husband who had hidden behind her aggressive bravado. Their rapid descent into reality was incredibly swift. Without Terrence's stolen money subsidizing their fake luxury lifestyle, they were violently ejected from their comfort zone. They are currently living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment above a noisy commercial laundromat. Chloe, the woman who had sneered at my work ethic and threatened to banish me to a damp basement, is now working 40 hours a week at a mid-tier department store in the local mall. I happened to walk past the storefront last month while running errands. I saw her standing behind a chaotic cash register, wearing a cheap polyester uniform vest, aggressively folding a stack of discounted sweaters, while a disgruntled customer yelled at her over a return policy. Connor was spotted by a mutual acquaintance bagging groceries at a discount supermarket, his desperate facade of being a wealthy entrepreneur permanently shattered. I did not stop to gloat when I saw Chloe. I did not even break my stride. The absolute best revenge is total irrelevance. They simply do not matter to me anymore. While the Washington family plunged into the dark abyss of their own making, my life accelerated into the stratosphere. Diane, my brilliant corporate attorney, helped me swiftly finalize a brutal, unyielding divorce settlement. Because Terrence was facing federal prison and possessed absolutely zero legitimate assets to contest my claims, I retained total ownership of the estate, my business, and my peace of mind. I officially liquidated the remnants of his fake portfolio to cover any outstanding legal damages, effectively wiping his existence from my financial records. My consulting firm has doubled in size over the past 6 months. We recently secured 3 massive multi-year contracts with top-tier federal agencies providing corporate due diligence that has set a new industry standard. I moved my corporate headquarters into a stunning glass high-rise downtown, expanding my team and solidifying my reputation as an absolute force in the financial sector. I am exactly the CEO they all desperately tried to convince me I could never be. A soft chime from the patio door interrupts my thoughts. My executive assistant stands in the doorway holding a clipboard and smiling warmly. The private catering team has finished setting up the main dining room, Keisha, she announces. The mimosa bar is fully stocked and the first guests are pulling into the driveway. Thank you, I say, standing up and smoothing down the skirt of my vibrant tailored emerald dress. Today is not just another Sunday. Today, I am hosting a high-end brunch for 20 of the most successful, brilliant Black women entrepreneurs in the state. These are women who build empires, who support each other fiercely, and who do not require proximity to arrogant men to validate their worth. These are women who share my skin tone, my drive, and my unyielding resilience. They are my chosen circle. They are my real family. I walk through the grand foyer listening to the lively sounds of a classical string quartet I hired to play in the corner of the living room. The catering staff moves efficiently, carrying silver trays of gourmet pastries, fresh fruit, and elegant appetizers. The house smells like expensive champagne and fresh orchids. The heavy front door opens and my guests begin to arrive. The grand foyer fills with the beautiful sound of genuine laughter, warm embraces, and uplifting conversations. Women in stunning outfits exchange business cards, compliment each other's achievements, and speak passionately about their next big ventures. There is no fake posturing. There is no malicious whispering. There is only absolute authentic empowerment. I stand at the edge of the living room, watching this incredible, vibrant network of women fill the space that was once poisoned by Terrence and Miss Loretta. My heart is completely full. My spirit is light. I turn slightly, and my eyes catch the small, discreet black lens of the security camera mounted in the upper corner of the ceiling. The exact same camera system that captured the truth and set me entirely free. I look directly into the glass lens. I let a genuine, brilliant smile cross my face. I slowly raise my coffee cup toward the camera in a silent, triumphant salute. I finally understand the ultimate truth. The greatest revenge was not arresting Terrence. It was not humiliating Miss Loretta or watching Chloe fold cheap sweaters. The greatest revenge was realizing that my brilliant mind, my thriving empire, and my profound self-worth were never theirs to take in the first place. I built this kingdom with my own hands, and I will reign over it exactly as I please. The most profound lesson from this journey is that your inherent value is never determined by people who are entirely committed to diminishing you. Toxic environments thrive on manipulation and constant degradation, designed specifically to keep you small, compliant, and doubting your own potential. However, true power lies in absolute silence and strategic execution. Instead of wasting precious emotional energy arguing with their delusion, focus entirely on building your own impenetrable foundation. When you stop fighting for validation at a table where you are continuously disrespected, you reclaim your ultimate authority and peace. Share your own journey in the comments below. If you have ever had to quietly build your strength to completely break free from a deeply toxic environment.